And we're live.
And we're live.
Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thanks
we're joined today by Kieran and Scott. Smithy, still? Smithy?
It's a difficult question, yeah. I never know how to answer that question people ask, but yeah, Scott. I think we're going to go with Scott for the purposes of...
because that's how I've always known you, as Smithy, you know.
Exactly.
Like, people are always like, back in the day, like, oh, Scott Smith's coming. I'm like, who?
And now it's back to Scott. I've always known him as Smithy as well.
Right, okay.
Smithy's how I know him, but...
How do you guys know each other, actually?
We started... Well, it was when Kieran joined a band, an old Dundee band, No Further Truth.
Oh, wow.
He came in to fill in for drums, and it was love at first sight.
I think Scott fell in love with my feet.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a genuine fetish, but being a drummer, I played double kick.
Ah.
Played double kick quite fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think Scott fell in love with it. So.
A little bit, yeah.
I think everyone always like has a little orgasm moment when they hear a drummer being able to do double kick.
A little bit, yeah. And then you notice when they're using one foot,
yeah.
it's even more impressive.
Yep.
But yeah, it was 10 years ago, and we've been pals ever since. I think we kind of hit it off. I think all 5 or 6 of us did, and then we've kind of stayed pals.
I think what really happened was you were in Montefieth and I was in Arbroath. So
sorry, if you want to just come forward.
Closer.
Yeah.
So we took the same bus, and I think the first time I had a conversation with Scott, I didn't understand a word he said.
Wow.
Because he speaks incredibly fast.
Not anymore. Since I moved to Glasgow, I've had to slow down a bit.
I assume his voice has gotten lower since then as well. So he's obviously, he just mumbles now, probably.
I'm doing well so far. I think anyway.
Bring back my pig. Are you doing elocution lessons before you came here?
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan.
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan.
Anchorman references already.
I know we're going to be some references on this podcast, so but we'll leave them till later, obviously.
Exactly. Parse them out. But yeah, so 10 years we've been pals now.
So what you guys been up to, like, individually, you know, not together, obviously, as hetero life mates?
We split up. We split up for quite a while.
No.
The band or the friendship?
We didn't see each other for a very long time
Yeah,
when we moved to Glasgow.
Not deliberately, just kind of... It's one of those things where you're kind of best friends with somebody, but you don't really speak all that often sometimes, you know, but the friend... Like, when we started speaking again, not fairly recently, but on and off 6 months ago, it's just like picking up the conversation, like, whenever left off.
Yeah. I think Scott, just as an example, Scott gave me a phone call a couple of weeks ago talking about relationship things, that sort of stuff. And it was as if it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
I mean, I had Bobby Simpson on last week, and I've not seen him in like literal years, and it just feels the same. Like, you never really feel that there's been a gap since we last seen each other. But it's a strange thing when we get to like our 20s and you start to realize that your friends are going to go away and do other things, and then when you do see them, it's just there's no gap really. But it's still weird though. Like, what's the next gap going to be like when we're all 40, and then we're at that strange age now, like all of us, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 30.
I'm 30 in 2 weeks.
Oh, birthday boy.
I'm the old man today, I'm 32.
32, okay.
Geez.
Actually, I'm not 30, I'm 31. Holy shit.
Hey, I'm the young man for once. Jeez.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I just forget my age now.
I've done that a few times. I've had to think, right, what year was I born? Let's add it up. Because you forget.
Yeah, after 30, it's like it doesn't matter. I don't care like how old I am now.
Until you reach the next bracket on the online forms. 29 to 35, and then after that I'll start I'm actually...
Even the grappling side of things, like, you know, I think we're masters now. Is that going into masters, is it?
That always perturbed me as
well.
Know. Yeah, it's like...
You only get 10 years, really, to be like a young pup. Then you're
exactly, it's not fair, man. It's not fair. Then you get, at least, I don't know.
Rolling with the 50-year-olds with granddad's strength.
Are you guys both still training, or are you doing some stuff? I know you've both individually done... You did BJJ.
Yeah, gi jiu-jitsu, sporadically. I've not trained properly in a long time. I say this all the time, I need to get back into it, but...
you should.
When I turn 30, I feel like I should get my ass into gear a little bit. But yeah, I train every now and again.
Yeah, I used to train quite a lot. I did some Muay Thai for a while. I think 2006, I want to say, I started Muay Thai.
Okay.
I've been on and off that. I had a couple of fights. Last year, I went to there was an amateur mixed martial arts tournament in Aberdeen.
Oh yeah, is that which one was that? The
Smart, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's it.
The Scottish Rookie Mixed Martial Arts.
And that's Mark Howe that runs that, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Is it Team Jugoku?
Yeah.
Is that what they're called? Yeah. He's a great guy.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like he's like a quintessential martial artist. You know, that's how you should be, I guess.
I remember hearing stories of him doing the 100-man kumites, which is ridiculous.
Wait, his name's Bruce Lee. Mark Lee.
Mark, yeah.
Oh,
But
geez.
can you imagine fighting 100 guys in a day? It's ridiculous.
I just thought it was committee with a K when I was younger. It was like they're just trying to like be cool.
Chanting weird things in these movies.
But with these 100-man kumites, is that to like to a knockout or like to a knockdown? Like what's the criteria for having beat the guy?
I don't know.
Well, in the movies, it's to the death. So if we take it from that, I guess.
What this is important. What movies are we speaking about?
So Mark Howe essentially killed 100 men.
Their hands.
I'm not sure how it works. I think it's maybe points or. It's been a while.
It's got to be knockdown.
I'm rusty on the sort of traditional martial arts. I did karate when I was younger, but that was like 20 years ago.
See, that's one of my biggest regrets, not picking up martial arts when I was a lot younger. Especially if you train with guys that have been doing even stuff like Japanese jiu-jitsu and stuff like karate. They've just got this muscle memory that I've got some from rugby, but nothing like martial arts. And it's like I feel like it's like a little bit behind.
Yeah.
When you've
Well,
got
like all the guys that I encountered when I trained in Dundee, all the rugby guys, they just have a base level that can transfer into anything. Like same with gymnastics in a way, but you have a base that a lot of people don't have from other martial arts like karate. Like you're not going to sprawl on someone, but you know how to sort of defend someone trying to take you down as well as sort of using your hips.
Well, that's something there's a video I was watching yesterday. It was I'm trying to remember the name of the YouTube channel. It was Squidge Rugby, I think the guy's name is. He was speaking yesterday about Leinster, the Irish rugby team, and speaking of a technique they've been using this season where it's something in the rules. After you get tackled, you have to put the ball down.
Okay.
They're basically using the momentum to kind of roll their hips. It's kind of like ebbying out, like shrimping out to make space to put the ball in a more advantageous position.
Okay.
And it's interesting how, I mean, that hole's going to get plugged. I mean, the referees are going to start at the speaker next season and be like, right, that's not happening again.
Head and arm control, start smashing them in the face.
Well, this is the thing. I can't remember if it's Aussie rules or rugby league, but it was in Australia certainly, and it was a prevalence of using neck cranks in rugby league a couple of years ago, and they had to put the kibosh in it. It's like guys, because rugby league gets down to the ground and then it's hold, and then you let the guy up and they put the ball between their legs, and guys were holding guys and just cranking just a little bit.
Is that not notorious, like in the scrum and all that stuff, for people just like throwing punches and gouging and
It used to be
spitting on each other?
I remember getting taught the old second row uppercut, which is where when you go into the scrum, you uppercut. I never had time for anything, but there is a lot of dirtiness in rugby. Like there's a lot of eye gouging, a lot of biting. I mean, at the amateur level, I witnessed it, and there have been high-profile examples of it in the high, professional game and the international level of people raking the eyes, of people not so much biting but stamping, and it is getting pulled out of the sport. And to its credit, rugby has become a lot more watchable over the past couple of years.
Did you ever do like an oil check on someone?
No, but it's a big part of my humor though. Telling people what oil checking is like an interesting thing to bring up to people who don't know a lot about grappling.
I mean, it just kind of explains itself really when you think about it. But if anyone asks and anyone doesn't know who's listening as well, it's basically it's an old Greco-Roman move, I think, from the Greek sort of Olympic days, and you sort of stick your finger up their ass.
No, it's the tailbone. It's using the tailbone as a handle.
Oh, really? I thought it was literally like you have to check to see how they're doing.
It's a digit. It's effective though.
That's probably the most famous example of that sort of cheating rugby that I've seen. Was that not a John Lumu style move? Thumb up the butt.
I
Wow.
don't remember that.
I'm sure it was.
John Lumu was more focused on running people over, literally.
Maybe someone did it to him then.
Maybe I'm
remembering his name and a thumb up the butt. So it's either rugby or a really strange movie that I watched.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm betting on it's a strange movie.
Yeah, maybe.
What is it about that though that it's sort of like instantaneously stops you from what you're doing? I mean, they say when a dog's attacking someone, like a vicious dog, and he's like grappling on. Like I've seen videos of just people walking up to a pit bull trying to take their Pomeranian's head off and then they'll just stick their finger up their ass because that's like it interrupts what they're doing in their mind and they stop instantly.
I can't think of many things I'd be in the middle of doing that somebody's sticking a finger up my arse would.
I can think of plenty actually.
Well, each to their own. Dan. Each to their own.
I'm not using myself as an example.
There would at least be a pause. There'd be a pause to recognise I've got a digit of my bum right here. Should I continue? Or?
Yeah. Is this part of it?
I hope I never have to use that advice.
You could do it on an attacker on the street as well, basically. But then that's a really intimate move as well. Like you're getting to know your attacker a bit too well.
Exactly, and there's
and he'd have to be half naked as well.
Indeed. Maybe, I don't know. Again, let's hope we don't find ourselves in that position. But yeah, but it's interesting. There are lots of really, I think there are a lot of like semi-legal techniques in a lot of sports that are kind of, mainly because they're hard to notice because the position of the camera or the referee doesn't really see it. Like, example would be like, what's it called in boxing? Not a nodder. Where like Evander Holyfield, like pretty much the reason why Mike Tyson bit his ear was because he would stop and drive his head up.
Okay.
Like techniques like that, like Floyd Mayweather's really bad for rubbing his the wrap on his glove against people's eyes to try and open up a cut.
But he's a dick.
He's a dick. Very talented dick, but a dick. But there are lots of these kind of things, kind of semi-legal.
Foot stomps, you know, they're legal in MMA, but if you do them, people just think you're a complete dick. But you're punching someone in the face and kneeing them and shinning them across the neck. But if you do a foot stomp, you're seen as a total douchebag.
So I think one of my favourite hidden cheat moves for guys in the cage is where they put their feet in between the mat and the cage.
Yeah.
Because there's a wee gutter there. And I think, who was it? Jake Ellenberger broke his foot.
Yeah. Of course, because it's going to happen one day. Like, someone's going to rip their toe off by sticking it down the back of that.
But the additional leverage you get from sticking your foot in there and pushing off is...
it's crazy.
That's the sort of thing you're talking about.
The other one's like grabbing the cage as well. Like, behind someone, obviously, you get like an underhook against the cage when you're pinning them. I think Khabib's notorious for it because of the gloves as well.
Czech Congo as well. Yeah. He's known for it.
Or people pulling themselves up from a takedown against the cage. That's like, and if someone does it to you while you're like doing MMA as well, you're like, I'm just gonna beat you up for this.
One of the things that I've been confused about is, and I should probably speak to a referee, but
your sexuality.
Yeah. If you're grabbing the cage with your hands, that's not allowed. You can't use your fingers in the cage. But you'll see guys on bottom turning themselves around with their toes in the cage.
Do you know what? In my last fight, I got shouted at because I was trying to swing my legs around for an armbar against the cage, and he's like, "Don't put your toes in the cage." And I was like, "I've never heard this."
No.
But I guess it's just the same as the.
Yeah. It shouldn't be allowed, and maybe it isn't. But
because it's dangerous, you could lose a finger. I mean,
but who really has like sovereignty over their feet and their toes? Like, it's not. You're not really like. How can you stop it really when it's up against it? You can't flatten your toes against the cage. I guess, I think it's just a byproduct of being up against it.
I mean, the referee's right to correct you for doing it because it's not allowed.
Legal,
it's, I guess, intention, I guess. But yeah, it is. I don't know. And
it differs from referee to referee as well.
It does indeed. It's something I've kind of been more interested because I kind of decided a couple of years ago I had harboured intention to fight at some point, but the more I think about it, I don't think I could do what I do for a living and get hit in the face.
Okay. What is it you're doing?
I work in software testing, so it's not so much an appearance thing. It's literally just getting my brains rattled about
your cognitive functions.
I'm not that smart.
You need everything you have.
Exactly. Yes. I've killed enough brain cells.
I'm the same as well.
But refereeing is something I've kind of considered because I am really interested in the rules and these kind of like what if conversations are
gray areas and sort of stuff.
Like something I remember asking on the MMA subreddit was, could you stomp on a guy's fingers when he has his feet on the ground? And it turns out you can't. I think it falls under the whole
you're not allowed to manipulate the digits.
Small joints.
Exactly. But then how can you stamp on a guy's toes?
I think they're going for the bridge of the foot. That's the thing. But still, though, that's part of the same bone structure as the hands. Like, it's just a mix. Yeah, they're total grey areas. But I think when they come up, people then ask them, and then try and figure them out as they go along. Obviously, there's some terrible rules in some organisations still, and it's. Yeah. I mean, I'm all for, like a number of people for bringing back sort of pride rails. I mean, I thought that was.
See, we spoke about this the other day. We were planning one of the episodes we're planning on doing for our podcast.
Oh yeah,
kind of the reason we're here.
Well, you might as well plug it just now.
Well, plug it. I forgot to mention that's why we're here.
What a beautiful segue.
Exactly. You get good practice. So yeah, Kieran and I are starting our own podcast. Kieran kind of got the ball rolling. But I think we both had an interest in doing this.
Yeah.
And really what we want to do is, I think anyone who follows MMA, whether you're a casual fan or whether you're like a hardcore fan, so to speak, would notice there's been a bit of a drop off in the past couple of years as far as how easy it is to follow the fights, because there's so many fighters, there's so many not just so many MMA events, but so many UFC events.
Yeah.
And of course,
you think there's like a saturation.
Exactly. If you look at today's card, for instance, there's lots of... I follow MMA quite closely. There's a couple of fighters on there whose last couple of fights I haven't seen.
Right.
And a couple of fighters that I've not really heard of. And I feel bad saying that, even though I do follow the sport quite well. But then you notice, like, something I've noticed Joe Rogan say a couple of times fairly recently is he would speak about Darren Till, thinking he's only had one fight in the UFC. No, he's had 5 fights. This is his 6th fight in the UFC. He's had a lot of fights.
I know.
But it's just, if Joe Rogan can't follow,
he
fucking works for them. You know what I mean? So it's...
it's probably... He says he's like, must have commentated on over 1,000 fights. But it must be getting like more rapid as he gets older, because there's more fights happening now, and it's just going to be exponential.
Well, I think it's exponential. You're right, it is exponential, but I think it's... I mean, there had to be more events because they expanded the weight divisions, and they continue to do that, and they're probably going to do that going ahead. If they're probably going to introduce the 165. I mean, I said this to Kieran the other day. It might just be that time of year.
Yeah.
This is kind of the time of year they start speaking about introducing cruiserweight, introducing a super welterweight. I think we would say
super 175.
Yeah, 175. Yeah.
I mean, the way it's currently sort of is, it's like it's not every sort of however many pounds after a certain weight it jumps by like 10 or 20, isn't it? And well, yeah. Do you think that's something that they should do? Go by like every 5 or every 10? Is that something?
I think
because there's a lot of in-betweeners.
There is indeed, and a point a lot of people tend to bring up is when you get into the higher weights, there's not so much of a problem having a bigger weight gap between the higher weight classes, because it's a question of the proportion of the body weight.
Yeah.
But I still think 205 to 265 is
That's
too
crazy.
much. I think 235 is a good mix, because 235 is bang in the middle almost, and it's and then 235 and up.
Yeah.
Because if guys like Butterbean can, they can't, but if they could, you know.
And the thing is, it's you'd still want them to have a bit of discipline as well. Like if they're just not doing anything in regards to their weight, because it's like basically open-ended at 265, I guess. There are some people who still have to cut a little bit to get there, but I think if it's 230, then they still have to think about what they're doing with their weight. You know, it's not something that they can just stroll up and not think about their diet. So they're forced to, you know. Well,
can you think of a fighter in the past, like a fighter that routinely fights above 265 that's known, even to like that known or is in any way successful? I can think of one. I think his name's Charles Huggy Bear,
right? Okay.
Something. He fought on one of the New Year's cards years ago. He's like 300 pounds, but he can do fucking backflips and stuff. It's pretty impressive.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think he fights in Japan quite a lot. He fights north of 265, but I can't think of anyone. Like look at UFC 1, Gerard Gordeau versus Tia
Tuivasa?
Exactly. That went well. You know, like bigger dudes typically don't do very well in MMA, and if they do, it's until they run up against someone who's relatively skilled. So
why do you think there's a sort of lack in the heavyweight division, and in boxing it was something that was always revered? Do you think they made a spectacle of it more in the boxing world when there was heavyweights around, or is it just there was more in the sport and it was something that was sort of utilized more, as the UFC is not? Is there just maybe not big guys attracted to sort of the UFC and MMA in general?
Well, if we give you a full answer to our thoughts, we'll be spoiling one of our episodes.
Have I just tapped into Pandora's box?
I'm either going to mine questions from my own podcast, or I'll try not to spoil
bastards. Get out.
But,
you ignorant slut.
That's something I was worrying about as well, thinking about why is heavyweight in MMA not as big as it was in boxing, or as it is in other sports, and I think it's because the amount of athleticism, there you go, that's the word, athleticism required for MMA is completely different to boxing. And I'm not saying that heavyweight boxers are unfit. That would be ridiculous to say.
Of course.
But the dexterity and athleticism that you need for MMA makes it so much harder for a bigger guy to be able to do it.
Yeah. And I guess if you do something as athletic as that, your weight's going to change. So maybe there's not a lot of naturally bigger guys in like in the US or that are at heavyweight, is whereas in boxing you can kind of let yourself go a little bit when you're bigger in the heavyweight division and still, you know, be able to hit. It's not going to affect your sort of athletic performance when you're sprawling, because there's no need for it, you know. I
think there's also a case of public opinion and public sort of stereotypes being that we want to watch big guys banging. You know, if you look at the promotional output for Stipe's last fight against
Ngannou,
there you go. I was thinking to myself, big guy, super strong. I couldn't think of his name, Ngannou.
You didn't say black though, so
nope.
We wouldn't have got it.
You wouldn't have got it. Well, I was describing most of the heavyweights until I got to that. But yeah, if you look at the promotional output for those two, because Ngannou was so big and strong and ridiculously sort of powerful, you compare that to something like Amanda Nunes, who has been destroying people at her weight class, is a legit beast. Like the promotional output between those two, and I mean, you might think I'm comparing apples to oranges because it's male versus female fighting.
Is it comparable? You know, because it's different weight classes. That's the thing. I mean, everyone seems to think Demetrius Johnson pound for pound. I mean, I'm on board with that, obviously, but it does call into question the type of competition he has and he's fighting against and his weight class. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, it might just. I mean, it sounds. This is how I feel about Demetrius Johnson. I feel as though if he keeps it up, his time's still to come, because it's going to get to a point where people are going to go, oh, the guy that just beat TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, he's eventually going to have these named fights, whether he goes up to 35 or they come down to 25. He's going to have these named fights, and people are going to look back on his back catalogue and be like, he beat John Dodson twice. He knocked out who in the first round? This is how I discovered fighters like Anderson Silva and GSP. Like, I would watch Anderson Silva, like one of the first events I watched with you, one of the first events I ever watched, I think it was versus James Irvin, I think it was. Because I remember you telling me a story, he knocked out James Irvin, and then Anderson Silva had to go backstage and train for a bit because he wanted to fight 5 rounds or 3 rounds and he couldn't do it.
Wow.
And then I remember watching that and going, that guy's fucking great. And then going back and watching all his other fights and thinking, oh, he beat Nate Marquardt. Oh, he beat all these guys that I'd kind of heard of. And he's like, oh, this guy's legit. So I feel as though maybe be super positive about it. That's how people are going to look at Demetrius Johnson, because I don't see him losing anytime soon. Not good. So yeah. I
mean, if you take MMA logic here, he got beat by Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz obviously got beat by is it Garbrandt, and obviously TJ beat Garbrandt as well. So by MMA logic, which we know is notoriously unstable, then TJ should be able to beat DJ.
Potentially, but then you've got the added factor of it being 125. Like a whole new. I mean, that's his whole thing. He wants TJ to make the weight. TJ doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would miss weight. I think he'd cut off some toes before he missed.
He's like a complete professional when it comes to that.
Exactly. I hope he doesn't burn out as well. That's my worry about TJ. Is that I don't think he's smart enough not to leave it all in the gym. I don't think a lot of fighters will be guilty of that these days. But I don't know. I think those two guys in particular are the way you bring a lot of attention to the lower weight divisions, which do have a problem with marketability.
I think they need a super fight at this point. It's a thing that's needed, you know.
I think the last card was the first card they had men's 125 pounders on.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
What?
It was John Lineker and Brian Kelleher.
Okay, yeah.
That was the first 135 fight on a main card.
125.
125. Sorry. That was the first 125 fight on a main card this year. So talk about needing a promotional push. I think they do need the division will need that.
But back to where we were before with the expanding the weight classes, like they had to do more events. They had to have more events, but I feel as though they've kind of kicked that into overdrive, and that's what I think what you were getting at when you said it was exponential. And it is kind of, there are too many events on now. Like it used to be the case you had maybe 3 events of a month. And there was the weeks in between, you could watch Titan Fighting Championships, WEC, Cage Warriors, UCMMA, all the kind of those kind of promotions, and they would kind of tide you over. Now you're watching those events. You
can barely keep up with the UFC by itself. You know, when you're trying to watch other promotions, it's just like, I don't even know what's going on here. You know, the backstories to half the fights. It's funny, like, the UFC must have a long-term plan, and you kind of maybe wonder if they're trying to, like, build the divisions, mine for talent, and then maybe get to a point where they can just have massive events all year long, but just and cut down how many they do and make the cards absolutely, amazing.
Exactly.
I think what I was hoping they were going to do when they started purchasing other organizations was maybe they keep Pride open in Japan and maybe they keep Strikeforce open.
Yeah.
And they're UFC branded organizations. They're going to be
smart.
feeder leagues.
Yeah.
So then you've got maybe Luke Rockhold or Daniel Cormier as the champions in Strikeforce. In New Year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you're going to have these big events where you've got cross-promotional fights.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been really cool and a good way to do it.
I think at the time they did it, it was probably impossible to do that because it was still competition at that time. I mean, now if they purchase Pride, they could probably do that because it's not their competition, really.
Yeah.
They're just so big, and the UFC is what it is. Oh, I used the MMA word. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
But yeah, like I think then it was just sort of they had to just get rid of that promotion because it was costing them probably, I guess.
And sort of brand value, you mean?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But now they could get away with making that a feeder league if they'd bought it over now. But I guess by buying them back then was what made them great now. So
exactly,
it's chicken and egg, I guess.
I wonder if that's what they're doing with Fight Pass because they bought up the rights, the sort of distribution rights for so many smaller promotions. Like Cage Warriors, for example, is notorious for being maybe notorious is the wrong word, but they're well known for being a good step into the UFC.
Well, if you're I'm sorry to interject, but if you're a champion in Cage Warriors, it's pretty much assumed that you might go into the UFC.
Yeah, McGregor wasn't he?
He was Cage Warriors,
the
lightweight
and featherweight. Yeah.
And Stevie Ray was as well.
Yeah.
Who else? Do you know what? I wrote a big list out the other day. There's too many I mentioned.
It's the same. Do you follow any local MMA? Because Bungard Chris is he's a guy that was on the podcast and he's in Cage Warriors and ABC. I think he fights for, but he's also fighting this week on Top, and it's for the title, and he's kind of got like a bit of momentum behind him. So I think if he wins this title, this could be his chance to get into the UFC. I guess.
Definitely keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
I like Chris's story. I listened to the podcast,
and
I've heard of him before, but I've always heard of him as like the bad guy.
Yeah.
And him being a total arsehole.
Completely not.
Well,
but what he did some things like when he was younger that he was just a young guy at the time, and he spoke about it on the podcast. He loves football, so he was playing amateur football, and he got in a fight with a guy, and he knocked the guy, and the guy was seriously hurt, and he was just lambasted across all the MMA forums. Oh, rightly so. He'd be the first to admit it, and then he got the moniker, the bad guy. But he's completely not like that, anymore, I guess, or at that point.
I think Paul Craig totally eradicated that when he came on, didn't he? He was very keen to tell everyone that
he's a pussy.
Chris is actually a lovely guy, and he's
exactly.
But
still kick your ass in the cage though.
They're the ones you got to watch out for,
Yeah, the nice guys.
It's always the quiet guys at jiu-jitsu that
maybe I shouldn't say nice guys. That's got a bit of a stereotype,
I know.
isn't it? Nice guys, quote unquote.
Trademark.
TM.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen any of that online.
What?
There's a subreddit called Nice Guys.
Oh yeah.
Nice guys that are like.
Is this incel or something?
It's related to that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's one of the stepping stones.
No way.
I think so. Yeah.
It's nice guys maybe at the bottom, and then you've got guys that use asterisks to describe their actions in text. So, have you never seen this?
No.
You know what I'm talking about.
That sounds
roughly
completely terrible.
So you imagine I'm a lady that you've met in the library at school.
You're not my type, but I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good cover.
So I've maybe got your number so we can study together later because we're in some of the same classes, and I'll text you and I'll say asterisk Doff's cap asterisk hello there, Dan.
All right.
Oh,
these
guys.
Your actions.
All right.
But it gets really creepy.
Yeah, that's never been cool though.
That's so weird.
There's a step up to incel.
What is the purpose of it though?
It's just super creepy.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
But did they know they're being creepy, or
I think they're being.
That's the problem. I think a lot of times guys have a poor idea with whether they're being creepy or not.
Yeah.
Some guys, obviously, there are a subsection of guys that know they're being creepy.
Yeah.
That's something they
intentionally doing. Yeah.
Indeed, but I think
they think it's being cute.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start a sentence with unzips his pants, you've stopped being cute.
I know what that is. You got me back on board. I know exactly.
But I think it's tied to this whole milady, the kind of fedora tip the fedora kind of means.
Who tips a fedora?
Who wears a fedora?
Who tips anyone with a fedora?
I mean, we're both losing our hair, and none of us wear fucking fedoras.
Who's losing their hair?
Oh, sorry. I am sorry.
Yeah, you are.
All of it. Yeah,
Shit.
I took that dive a couple of months ago. Yeah.
It's a big realization when you realize that you're going bald.
No,
I think that's it. I'm old now.
I don't know. There's people that went bald. I know from like the age of 17.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I used to be in a punk band, and I had a big pink Mohican. So
all right.
Obviously, we're recording audio. Hopefully, people on YouTube or whatever can see. I had a big pink Mohican on top of my head like this.
He's demonstrating being a Mohican. You know.
With my fingers.
Like
I
the
shaved
guys
that
from
off so
Streets
that
of
I
Rage.
could,
Sorry, you know the guys from Streets
Yes.
of Rage, the punks.
Exactly like that, except for it was pink. So to get a proper job, I had to shave it off, and my hair just never came back.
Wow.
It just
So you're blaming your hair on having to get a job?
100%.
Fuck capitalism is the.
The amount of things people try to blame it on, it's like, oh, it's because you use Head and Shoulders. It's because you wash your hair every day. It's because you wear those headphones. It's like, no, it's just genetics. And it's not too bad. It's just because my hair's that thick. And when I had it a bit longer, it was starting to show. And I thought,
well, when I was younger, when I was trying to grow my hair, for some reason that I just hated the way my hair sat the whole time. For some reason it just didn't bode well with me. But I still wanted the long hair, so I would always wear like a hat of some sort. And when I was in college, one of the girls I was friends with, she was like, when we're all going to meet up when we're 30, like, you're going to be bald and fat, because I used to eat all the time as well. Like, I got to 30 and I was like, yes.
You still do, obviously, you just keep the work up. Exactly. That's half the battle, I guess.
I don't understand the stigma behind being bald.
No, neither do I.
I don't think there is anymore.
I think
I mean, she was weird. Well, I don't know if I want to mention it, actually, but I'll tell you off air, actually. It doesn't matter. There was a bit of strangeness. She was into bald guys, and yeah, there was a whole lot.
But I think there's definitely a male thing where people equate being bald as a negative. There's a lot of hair growth stuff. You get hair plugs, things like that. Is it not
to do with something like an overexposure to testosterone? Is that not one of the factors to it?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, like in the womb, I think if it's over, or it comes from something like that. Yeah,
probably just genetics. My dad's bald.
I heard it was genetic.
My dad's bald.
When your mum's
like he went bald at 21.
Makes sense.
And I was like, all the way up until I was 21, I was like freaking out. I was going bald, literally measuring my hairline like every year just to see if it was going back the way.
Well, that's what I did. I had like a freckle here, so I used to compare my hairline to this freckle and be like, right, we're good lads.
Just tattoo your hairline.
Every time I got my hair cut, I'd be like, right, doc, give it to me straight. Am I going bald every single time? No, you're fine. You're fine. I shouldn't have been asking, because I realize there's a financial interest there. Into,
You're definitely not going bald. Come back next week.
Exactly. Well, next month.
You've got too much hair.
But to some people, it's devastating to go bald. You know, that's something that all males think about once in their life, or many times if they're actually going bald. And it is, I don't know. I don't know why it's tied to masculinity. You know, it seems to be. That's what I
mean about the stigma. But the way I've looked at it, to be honest, I've never really cared about my hair.
No.
I always just got a shaved short anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's super easy. But I think I've realised that if you take the sort of responsibility to say, look, I'm going bald, I'll just shave it off and I'll just own it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power in that. And it's not the way that I look at things, but in terms of sort of attractive men in the media, bald men are always up top of the list.
Yeah.
I mean, from my times reading Cosmopolitan. But yeah.
It never has it out its hands.
I think, yeah.
And Cosmopolitan.
Train station.
Exactly. I certainly got to a point where I realised, right, I could get it cut, because that's my friend used to cut my hair, and she said, I could still cut it a certain way so you can. I said, I can't do that. I'm not that guy. I can't sit there for like 20 minutes every day, like, and then going and checking every.
Because we all had the emo fringe when we were younger. I don't know about you. You just went straight to punk, did you?
Yeah, I went straight to the bald head, basically.
I definitely.
Screw conformity. I'll do what every other punk does.
Exactly.
I wish I could have a fringe. But,
we're definitely of a generation to have gone through an emo phase.
I know.
Definitely.
I read, what was it I read? I think it was on, it might have been Vice of all things, which I despise internally and externally. I think they said that emo was the last great sub-genre, you know, the last little clique, that there's nothing been like something like that since, you know, and that was I thought it was quite astute when I read it, and it went in depth into that sort of subculture, and it was the last great one, they said, and it was
well, what one are you talking about? Are you talking about the emo in the 2000s or emo in
Well,
the
that was
80s?
2000.
Because this was the whole bone of contention when we were 10 years ago.
It's not really
you'd say emo and be like, are you speaking about Finch? That's not real emo. What was the website again? Forfa.com. That was everyone would refer. Yes, that whole. Let's skip the whole conversation.
It's only in Dundee they would have that kind of argument with someone, though. A bunch of elitist fucks, as they say.
I think that's definitely the last genre of music I remember people being that elitist about.
Yeah.
But to be fair, like a lot of the bands I still listen to, a lot of those bands, like I listened to Funeral for a Friend a couple of weeks ago, and fuck was I listening to?
But like Casually Dressed, a brilliant album. An Art of American Football as well.
Yeah, great song.
That boy can't sing.
True, but neither could Mr. Pedo from Lost Prophets.
That's true.
And they have some banging tunes.
They do indeed. Although I feel weird listening to them.
If he'd spent as much time trying to get singing lessons as trying to touch kids, then he probably would have been a great singer.
In jail.
Well, see, that whole situation really fascinated me. Like when that whole thing came out, because it just seemed to me as if it was like a constant escalation of depravity.
Just to sort of preface it, and for people that don't know who are from like the States and whatever, there's a band that are from Wales, and when we were all in our emo phase during the early 2000s, that was a band that came through the ranks. Lost Prophets, and the main singer recently, he was charged with loads of counts of stuff to do with paedophilia, and he's like, they say he was one of the most prolific cases of someone targeting women and their kids to then, and it was something that he didn't just prey on the children, he preyed on the mothers as well to then set them up with these kids. I mean, that's terrible. A mother should never do that, obviously, but he did target these type of people so he could then do what he wanted.
Lowest of the low, definitely. Yeah. But how that situation came about, it's always kind of, I feel fascinated, but it interested me because it's like, it just seems like escalation upon escalation. Like I remember I'd hear stories, people would say, oh, he's into lots.
Did you ever hear anything? I never heard anything.
You never know, because you always have like people that would say, "Oh, I used to go out with so and so from Every Time I Die. I used to go out with so and so from Under Oath," and you'd be like, "Did you?"
I'm sure it wasn't go out. It was like I gave a blowjob in an apartment under a bed.
It's a low threshold. But you would hear stuff about Ian from Lost Prophets being into weird stuff, and especially it was the thing I'd heard from a couple of different people was he was taking drugs and having sex at the same time.
Did he not pee on a fan on a bus as well? That was a thing.
That wasn't Lost Prophets. Who was that? That was the guy from Bring Me
the Horizon. Yeah, they'd kicked a couple of girls off their tour bus.
Was that?
Peed on them because they were trying to break into the national.
So you did hear some like little things.
But you never know how much truth it was. But then when this came out, I was like, I remember hearing this. You never know how true it was. But it just seems as though like obviously you hear about the rock star lifestyle and the life of excess, and I just think that was a particularly gruesome and negative end to that particular,
I mean, that's
situation.
the only way he could go, because he didn't seem like he regretted any of it.
No.
I mean,
he's come out recently and said he doesn't regret any of it, and he's still into it.
You have to think some of that's because of some brain trauma or something like that, because that is not something that's sort of normal, and it's not like, I don't believe in evil. There's a whole factor of things that can lead to anything. We can get to from here to Hitler in a matter of years. It's not someone's born evil, I guess. It's just a number of factors and whatever. But there is a lot of cases to say that head trauma or head injuries can lead to sort of things like that. And I wonder if that's anything to do with it, or he might just be mentally ill in itself.
Or alcohol and drug abuse. There is definitely people who have problems with memory and problems with behaviour as a result of a lifelong abuse of alcohol. So it can erode those kind of things as well. I'm sure I don't know a lot about it myself, but I know people who've worked in that field. So not making excuses for the boy, obviously.
Of course not.
Absolute, bastard. But these situations don't just come about because somebody is born evil. Some people are born evil, but they don't just come about. You don't do that kind of stuff without years and years and years of preamble, and it just.
Or being abused, but there is a percentage of people that were abused. I mean, that's the cycle of it, a vicious cycle. If you abuse someone, then they tend to go on to then abuse other people later in life. Some don't, obviously, but I wonder, I never heard anything about that in his life, that anything like that had happened to him, which is strange. It seems like he's just like, I don't mean it in a good way, like an enigma in that way. Like there's just doesn't seem to be any support and evidence to him being like this, eventually.
Exactly.
I remember hearing the argument a while ago about paedophilia and similar things being a sexuality.
Amos Yee, that
Well,
guy.
there's a bunch of a group of people that think that it should go the way of people who, obviously, homosexuality was illegal in a lot of countries for a long time, and then when that was changed, and then they wanted to same-sex marriage, which is brilliant, that all came about, but these sect of people are trying to say it's like that, and it's a sexuality, and it's something they can't choose. And I don't know how much of that. It's hard to swallow when it's someone that can't consent. That's the thing.
That's where I draw the line. I think a sexuality, I see it as, this is obviously going to sound horrible for people that are gay or whatever, and I don't mean it like this, but I think you've got fetishes, that's fine, people can have their own fetish. You've got a sexuality above that, which is totally fine, that's what you're up to and what you're into, and that's the way you are, that's cool.
Why do you think that sounds bad though? That doesn't.
Oh no, I mean, like,
he's getting to it.
I mean,
I'm joking.
I mean, relating a sexuality to a fetish.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Like, just because I might be into feet is in no way the same as someone who's gay. Like, I might get the piss taken out of me for liking feet. I don't, but as an example.
I don't think it's either or. I think there's grey areas. Like, I think people are born gay, and there's people who become that later in life, because of experiences early in their sexual sort of history. Like, that's something that can then go and shape how they express their sexuality. But I think it's the same with, like, there are people who are born gay as well. It's just, it's like not one or the other.
But what I think is, if I can understand the sort of pathway to lead you to think that, okay, this is paedophilia is a sexuality, and let's treat it as a sexuality and address it in that way. The reason I think that's wrong is because there's no agency on the other side. There's no consent and no permission. It's that's where I was going with the feet thing, with the gay thing. Like, there's traditionally going to be some consent there if I'm going to like someone's feet, right?
Can their feet consent though? That's the thing.
I don't think they can.
They're attached to a consent. So yes, I know.
The feet can nod. That's fine for me. I'll take that as a go.
You keep bringing feet up. This is weird.
It's just the first example.
He's awakened.
He thinks he does
awakened
protest
something.
too much.
Just don't take your shoes off around me.
But I've got one. But to that, I mean, I think you don't really just pick what you're into. I think that's what you're kind of getting at. It's like you said. I think this is something Chris Ryan hits on quite a lot. Is there are certain kinks and certain things that you develop because of things that have happened in your past, or just it's your first exposure to that, and that's the first time you had like sexual feelings, and that's kind of awakened something in you. So
and depending on what age it is, that can stem from abuse, obviously, as well.
Exactly. And I think I can't remember how this works, but I remember there being a documentary on Channel 4 years ago, and it was a guy who'd come out to a psychiatrist or something and said, I have feelings towards kids, and they have to report it from that point. He'd never done anything to that point, but it was something he had to go in the register or something like that.
Wow. And
I feel as though, I mean, if you acknowledge that you have these feelings and you would never act on them, you should be able to go to a psychiatrist and be, this is a problem I've got. Anyone who has the kind of strength to admit that, even under the guise of doctor-patient confidentiality, there needs to be an avenue for these people to come out and say, because at the most, that I think not having an outlet for that, being able to find help for it, I think we all know the end of that kind of equation. But yeah, I think that's what Kieran was hitting on earlier. You don't really pick a lot of this stuff,
It's such an emotive subject, though. That's the thing. It sparks so much rage and hatred and just sheer venom towards people that sort of think that way, and rightly so. It's like in some cases, like if you're doing something to someone who can't consent, that's just the bottom line, and that's terrible. Like you're saying, it's just there's no agency on that other side. But at the same time, there's facts that we can't ignore, and a lot of it comes from abuse. That's why it perpetuates, and a lot of it comes through whatever's gone in their life, and we have to realize that there are things that are facts that we can see, that it's not just a straight up this person's evil. That we can't just put it down to that, because then you can do anything in that name. Like when you're fighting evil, you can do anything to anybody. And that's where things can get crossed, and that's where terrible things can happen.
Definitely. I mean, have you heard of this Amos Yee guy? So he's done I'm sure you guys have heard of Count Dankula. He was on Count Dankula's channel last week. I think he did.
You're triggering some people who are listening just now.
Well, I don't.
Was Count Dankula the one with the Nazi dog?
Yeah,
Was that him?
Okay. Yeah.
The dog's not a Nazi.
No, he's a Nazi. No,
he's not a Nazi.
Let's not start this fucking conversation. I can't be fucked having this conversation on Reddit and in real life. But
surely it's better in real life, though.
Yeah, definitely. He had Amos, this guy called Amos Yee on his channel.
How do you spell that?
AMOSYEE.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, he's from Singapore. He said something about the government over there, and he's moved over to United States. I think it's the same guy. I'm not too sure. But anyway, he has been hitting out with this, paedophilia is completely normal. Children who start sexual relationships early in life, it's beneficial and all this bullshit. And it's funny because it kind of falls into this kind of sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of a way of looking at it, where people would argue about giving a guy like that a platform.
Yeah.
He made an absolute arse of himself for at least 40 minutes. He's been on twice. He's no leg to stand on. He's got one study that he cites that he can't go into the details of.
Yeah.
He refuses to. As soon as you start questioning on them, he's like one of these guys. It's like, no, but listen. Here's another one. So he doesn't.
Anecdotal evidence everywhere.
Exactly. So even people that are advocates of this fucking ridiculously horrible behaviour, they don't have a leg to stand on. And I think if as like I said, sunlight's the best disinfectant, and discussing these things out in these kind of settings are beneficial.
It's hard when you can't advocate something like that. That's just the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
You can only sort of try to understand it and see where it comes from, and then try to prevent it. That's if you can. That's just, it might be something that we're dealing with throughout history, because it's just something that people can't help and society can't prevent either. It's going to perpetuate somehow, but you can't advocate it in any way. That's the thing.
What's been interesting me recently, and I think you sort of touched on it there with the sort of, let's give these guys a platform to speak, and the sunlight will be the disinfectant. One of my friends recently was talking on Twitter about the Irish abortion law change. The
shout out to Ireland for voting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how close or what was the margins of it, but
I think we were roughly 70-30.
Wow.
Yes.
So they voted.
It's about as good as you can get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, if that was the Yes campaign, that would be great.
We'll kick off that in a second.
I mean, for Scotland, not.
I can see Scott twitching there. One of the things that my friend had said was, we've got we seem to have this total hard-on for having a balanced debate. Let's give both sides an equal weight. And on some of the things like what were they calling it, the Eighth Amendment?
Yeah.
It wasn't balanced. The favour there in Ireland and abroad isn't balanced. It's predominantly, let's get rid of this. Yeah. This is a terrible thing.
When you have something like that in your constitution, that's not good,
So people wanted a 50-50, or people on the sort of no side would want a 50-50. Let's have our side as prevalent as the other side in the media. It's maybe not fair to give the other side 50% of the.
Just to sort of tease out what you're saying a little bit.
Yep.
I always talk about that in terms of giving a platform to a group who you're giving them a 50-50 platform, but their representation is not actually that. Was it Ken Ham when he debated Bill Nye, the creationalist?
Exactly.
He was given a 50-50 platform, but creationalist percentage in America is extremely low. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of disingenuous to sort of show them on equal lengths to then try. But then by giving them that platform, did they then show that they're idiots?
Yeah.
Is that the thing?
Enough rope.
Yeah.
I
think that's what they kind of thought would happen with it, but sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. You know?
Well, I haven't seen it. I mean, did he give a good account of himself?
What, Ken Ham?
Yeah.
I mean, all I did was facepalm through the whole debate.
Exactly. This is exactly what I did. I was at work listening to this Amos Yee guy, and it was funniest thing I've heard all year. Not funny, but just listen to someone avoid having a conversation for so long. It is just
See, we're saying that because we all are on that side of the spectrum. But if your confirmation biases are speaking to whatever Ken Ham says, or whatever, I can't remember his name now. Whatever he says, you'll be listening.
Amos Yee.
Amos Yee, there you go. If you're listening to Amos Yee and he's hitting things and you go, I agree with that, it doesn't matter if there's evidence there or not for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's probably why the flat earth stuff's just like spread like wildfire.
I think I can add another layer of conspiracy theory on top of flat earth. This is a bit out there,
conspiracy Smithy, that's what we're going to call you.
It's not. It's a conspiracy theory about
Smithy. I was going to try and
Consmithacy.
It's consmithacy. That's brilliant.
Yeah, not the first time I've heard that. But this is more conspiracy theory about the conspiracy theory, right? So there's a book by a writer called Ian Banks. He died a couple of years ago, but prolific Scottish writer. He wrote Crow Road.
Was he not from around here?
From Edinburgh, I think he's from Edinburgh.
I think I know where you're going with this, actually.
Yeah. So there's a bit in a book, my favourite Ian Banks book, the first one I read, The Wasp Factory, where the guy's dad speaks about how he sends letters to universities all across the world about how saying that the world is indeed flat, and the map of the world that's the actual flat, that's actually what the world looks like. And I can't help but notice that this whole flat earth thing really kicked off after Ian Banks died. And I'm just...
So you think someone's at it, like in his memory, or him in death, like what do you call it, post-mortem?
Yeah.
He's sending things out to universities to make it look like there is a conspiracy.
I'm just saying it's just
makes sense.
It's been in my mind since it came. I just thought I can't help but notice that it was not long after he died that this whole flat earth thing started to kick up a bit of dirt in.
Do you know what? I think you're going somewhere with that because, spoiler alert, if no one's read Wasp Factory, the main character does actually have a bit of a gender switch towards the end.
When was that written?
Oh, ages ago. I mean, my dad had read it like 4 or 5 years before I'd read it. So, I mean, it's been out for 20 years, I would say, maybe. But yeah, it's a really interesting book. The main character goes through it the whole book, convinced that, again, spoilers, convinced that
if you've not read it in 20 years, then go fuck yourself.
I'm trying to keep mind of the pronouns in this example. So he grew up his whole life thinking he was male, and he was told by his father, who'd lied to him routinely throughout his whole life, that his genitalia had been bitten off by a dog.
Wow.
But it turns out actually he was a girl, and his dad just really wanted to have a boy and was giving him hormones and stuff like that too. So
this came out 20 years ago.
Yeah, wow. It's quite a forward thing.
How prophetic. That's crazy.
A little bit. And it was an interesting book to read as a young adult, because it is a lot about male identity and stuff, and you start to realise that a lot of male identity is just pantomime. You know, it is, because without going deep in the book, the Wasp Factory is a lot about being hyper masculine and you know, like,
it's strange that someone who is a male would write something like that as well. I mean, and must be in the guise of being a male as well. And I think it's obviously a metaphor for trying to find yourself. I've not read it obviously, but what is masculinity? That'll be the question I guess it's proposing, or parts of it. And like that's something that we don't hear and see a lot nowadays either, because it's all sort of geared towards being against the patriarchy and toxic masculinity.
It seems to be just a fix-all excuse for a lot of male behaviour. That's just toxic masculinity. That's easily explained. It's like, no, it's more complicated.
Well, they're divisive words. They're trying to like shut down conversation. That's not good. We need to talk more. We do need to talk more. Yeah. And it's not something. Here's the thing. I don't find that guys don't like speaking about their feelings. They don't like speaking about their feelings in certain company. I mean, namely in front of like other women. They don't like to open up so much. I found from my experiences. But if you get speaking a couple of beers, you get into some pretty deep conversations about like how, like, stuff that men typically don't speak about, like how a certain breakup made you feel, how, you know, like having low self-esteem. These things do come up. It's just more difficult to get to. It's not. I think we're at an advantage because we grew up in the type of music that we did, you know, and that was something that obviously you're listening to music that talks about feelings. I think the worky guy that, you know, grows up, does joinery and that, and then his son comes up, does another trade. I think that's maybe where general I can't even say it. Sometimes in general
in life.
That's where that sort of isolation comes from. I think like we're just lucky that we grew up in a generation and a subculture of people that we're listening to people talk about their feelings. And in song and, you know, in our groups, you know, that's how we bonded when we were younger. And I guess that cements that slightly, but there are the people that work 9 to 5 and they just completely isolated mentally and physically as well.
Exactly. Like as Kieran said earlier, I needed to talk a couple of weeks ago, phoned Kieran, talked it out, felt infinitely better afterwards. And this is something typically men don't do, but we do it. Yeah. It's just we don't speak about doing it very often.
And this is something that's come up over the last couple of weeks. I've mentioned it a few times now. Is with the guy from Frightened Rabbit. Obviously, that sparked that conversation in Scotland again. Because I don't know the details now. Have you heard anything like what's happened?
No.
I haven't heard any more detail.
I tend to find these situations tend to revolve around pretty personal issues. So try to tease them apart unless it's it's known publicly why it happened. I don't like to try and tease these situations apart because that's for his family and close friends to do. And I wasn't a big Frightened Rabbit fan, so it's not a big, but it is a big. I think we've all got friends that have attempted or committed suicide or at least approached that point, you know, and it's well,
a bunch of us like know people that it happened to in Perth. Like Perth, Scotland seems to be a place where it happens quite prevalently. You know, from Canoe Hill and the bridge that goes across the Tay, I think it is there.
That's right.
Tay Bridge, yeah. It's but
usually high numbers. You know, I don't know what it is about.
And our demographic as well. Our demographic is at 18 to 45. It's the most common or something like that. So but the thing is, we're reacting to it healthily. As a I'm not speaking about men here as well. Women, I find myself speaking about mental health very often these days because it is a part of the conversation. You know, people are worried, and it's because I think people are worried about each other. Like when this Frightened Rabbit thing happened, I was worried about people I know that are big fans. I was like kind of keeping an eye on them, not cynically, but just like we're constantly on the lookout because it is a part of the conversation. And I just think when you hear that like men are unempathetic, toxic masculinity stops men speaking about their feelings, where? Because I don't see it as a man who tries to have these conversations quite often. I don't see it.
But something is happening though, where men feel like they have to do this. You know, is that because they can't speak, or is it because of just mental health issues? You know, something is happening to young men where they go on and then do this, and obviously they're feeling like something's not right in their life, and that's why they have to go on and kill themselves eventually. So where is it the point of sort of, you know, the nexus point in that?
I think everyone's got something that please don't think everyone has something that causes low self-esteem, whether it's comparing to other people or a lack of an ability to, well, like you're not as smart as you want to be, you're not as fit as you want to be.
Are you talking about me specifically? I invite you guys on my podcast and you just diss me completely.
Jeez. I'm projecting, Darren.
No.
But you know what I mean? But yeah, it's I think everyone's got, so it's difficult to pin it because I think everyone has an individual thing that kind of gets to them. But it's speaking about it, because it's all a matter of getting it from in here to out there, to from the voice in your head that runs things over constantly to saying it out. That's what I found useful speaking to you on the phone the other day, was saying all this stuff out loud that's been in my head and just infinitely. I think you said one thing and it just unlocked a box in my brain and I was like, I've been looking at this all wrong. And it's just,
there's another perspective here that I've not thought of.
Exactly. And this is the whole thing. This is what's really, really useful. And I take it kind of personally when people say, oh, it's just toxic masculinity. It's like, we're not that fucking simple. Like, I know it seems kind of base, beer, booze, boobs. That's kind of, but not, we're a bit more complicated than that, guys. You know?
And the Bible, of course,
the
if
Bible,
we're in America.
of course. Always carry a Bible.
The 4 B's.
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, you keep hearing people talking about mental health and saying, look, my door's always open, my phone's there, give me a call whenever you need. And that's coming from a good place. But for anyone listening to this who's been in that position where you felt really down and you've had suicidal thoughts, people will know that it's not for want of people to speak to. It does take someone to be a little bit more perceptive and reach out and say, look, how's it going, Scott? I've not heard from you for a few weeks. How are you feeling? And you don't even need to think about their mental health. You just think about being a good friend and being a good listener.
Exactly.
And when we had a conversation a few weeks ago, I just read something about different levels of listening. A lot of people listen really superficially, waiting for their turn to speak. And you go a little level below and you listen to what someone says and try to empathize and put yourself in their position and respond as if it's a genuine conversation. That's what you need if you're feeling super low. You really need someone to listen to what you're saying. And if you're feeling that low, there's a good chance you're not going to reach out and speak to people.
Exactly.
My door is always open, but I wouldn't expect like one of my friends with depression to come knock on it and say I've got depression.
Yeah.
Because if you're depressed, you don't get.
I mean, whoever's done that, like whoever's knocked on someone's door and be like, "Can you help me? I'm depressed." Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
I think you have to be a little bit perceptive to people around you. So there's one of my friends who we will all know did recently try to commit suicide, and I think it was an accidental suicide attempt, but he was hospitalised and he nearly lost his life.
Wow.
And I think he knew exactly what to think about in his head, and he knows about mental health. He's a smart guy, but it didn't click for him until he'd been through it himself.
Right.
And now he's come through the other side, and he's recognised in one of his friends. I've not heard from him for a while, and he's usually quite sociable, and I'll give him a phone call. So he phoned him up, and the guy was, at the end of his sort of tether.
Wow.
And he says, look, you need to go out and socialise with people. You need to speak to people. Give this guy a call. Give this guy a call. And he went out and spoke to those other guys and says, listen, this guy, I can't remember his name, let's just call him Chris. Chris isn't having a good time of it recently. You should take him out for a coffee and have a chat. Yeah. And it's sometimes that 10-15 minutes that's going to make the difference.
So essentially, the sort of moral of it all is just to be proactive with your friends, just to see and sort of talk and make sure that there's nothing going on any level in your mind, that's sort of dangerous.
Yeah, just be a nice, thoughtful guy.
Exactly.
Friend.
But it's hard when there's so much shit going on in the UK, but it's still like that's, you have to be community orientated, I guess, and that's just one of the things that we have to do.
You do. It's easy to get wrapped up in other stuff, but you got to stick close to home. I think you've got to look to your friends and stuff.
We've never had a greater time as now with the internet, and there's so many things like podcasts and YouTube where we can sort of all communally talk about these things. Exactly. I mean, how long would this have taken to have sort of spread through the social paradigm, like in the 70s? Like, it would have barely made an impact. But when something like that happens in the UK, like with this guy dying, it instantaneously changes the conversation, which is amazing.
I think what is really amazing is it feels like I'm not particularly close to Frightened Rabbit or their singer or issues that he's going through. Yeah. But it feels like one big conversation. Yeah. Rather than a small conversation here and here and here offline. It feels like one big conversation. Yeah. Which is good because a lot of people can pull their own personal stories into that. Yeah. And they become woven into the conversation.
But even back, like, say 10 years ago, even the internet at that point wasn't that as connected. There was a bunch of forums and pockets of places that people went to, and maybe those conversations happened. But now it feels like the actual whole of the internet is connected, which is a strange thing because obviously the internet is very connected in all ways.
Yep.
And I suppose opening up online is a bit easier as well because of as much as people make of anonymity being a way people get away with horrible stuff online. Anonymity as well can be very useful for reaching out for advice. Like, you see so many threads, like going back to Reddit obviously, how many threads looking for pretty specific advice are from throwaway account 1185. There's a certain degree of the anonymity the internet offers that allows you to kind of have these conversations because you don't want your colleagues knowing that you're going through this kind of thing, or you don't want your partner reading that you're questioning your relationship, whatever. So the internet is a pretty good tool. Yeah, funnily,
it's the best and the most terrible tool.
It can be.
It's just a shame that a lot of people use the anonymization to drop N-bombs.
But then you get.
Do you want to do it right now? Is that what you
want
to say?
Please don't.
No.
Well, I'll blur out your face on the YouTube video. You can do it right
now. You're right. But then there have been a lot of things like anonymous activism and stuff like that. It's unveiled a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
And so internet's a very interesting tool. It's how you wield it, I guess.
But it's as much as it's easy to sort of pull together and do great things, then that can be it's easily to infiltrate those things and make it look bad, worse than it is. More worse, that's terrible. Worse than it is. Yeah, sorry, worse.
Laura's going to kick your arse.
No, she hates that. Grammatical errors. She's given up on it though because Scotland's terrible for it, so she's just she just subjects herself to it now.
But on the plus side, we don't throw random Z's and things. We spell things.
Yes,
correctly.
exactly.
So
yeah.
True.
Especially colour. Like, it's a wonderful COLOUR word.
Exactly.
No, that's not it.
No. Aluminum.
Aluminum.
The other one.
So take it to depression. You were wanting to talk about feet again. You said.
Yeah, I've just dropped it in. I thought I'll go for a beer, and then I seen Scott's socks, and that was me. No, I was just saying to Darren there. I remember where the foot thing came from and why that was so. It was because I was thinking about Mindhunter. Have you seen Mindhunter?
I have indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking fetish, and then I thought that guy has a fetish for shoes. That's where the feet thing came in. So there you go.
What a fucking show, though! It's brilliant.
I know. I really like that. It's one of the few shows on Netflix I've watched twice.
Wow.
But I feel like I wouldn't say got really into serial killers a couple of years ago, but I certainly went in the thing. You know, you watch like documentary after documentary after documentary, and I feel really bad because I kind of know where they're going with the next season of this show. I know what serial killer they're going to do.
Because you've read so much into it. Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure because I know this because the serial killer they're probably going to do is BTK.
Okay.
But I know he took a break for like 10, 12 years.
Sorry, if you just move in.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize we were back.
Oh, right. Yeah, we are.
Oh shit, we're on. We're live. You have a chill sunning moment there. But yeah. But I'm really impressed with that show. It's like Ed Kemper was a really, really interesting guy.
We're trying to remember his name.
He's one of these guys. I didn't realize he was so big. I didn't realize he was like 6'9" until I watched the documentary mention. Fuck, you never. That's another dimension. Another dimension to it. You never really realize, and it's
the actor that played him's been in something else. I can't remember. Big guy. What was he in? He was in something extremely funny. I can't remember.
I don't think I've seen him in anything. But I was very surprised to see Ed Kemper and then see the actor.
Yeah,
they're very, very good.
So similar.
Oh shit! Sorry.
Like,
done a good job with the casting.
He's obviously did it. He's done his homework with that guy. Do you think they're going to do they're going to have Manson in there? I mean, he's been mentioned. He's in the universe if we're talking movie terms.
Manson, was he a serial killer though? I mean,
he wasn't. Technically, he wasn't.
Was this whole
serial?
He didn't kill anyone.
He was a fucking nutbag.
Well,
he died. Did you not? He died recently. Yeah. So
he didn't kill anyone technically.
Technically, it was all. What was the name? The big dude, Buck. The dude that did all the killing, the guy that said the famous line where the devil do the devil's work.
Yeah,
that dude. Yeah, Tex Watson. Yeah, that's his name, I think.
Because they have mentioned him and they said they want to speak to him in the. I think it was one of the first episodes. Yeah, that's such a brilliant show, and the cinematography as well. It's just like it's unreal. It's beautiful.
But I was happy that it didn't become this episode we're speaking to. I'm happy they didn't do that. I'm happy they looked at other but like the whole becoming the serial killer.
Well, there is like a thematic thing with it where each episode there is something that's happening that we're not totally aware of at this point, and it's going to become more prevalent, I guess. Which
is something I think they really missed in the Hannibal Lecter books, movies rather, like Red Dragon and stuff. That's an element of it I don't think they really dipped into, which is the kind of becoming the serial killer. They made passing references to it, but not being able to get the Lecter out of his head. But then when Clay Starling became in it, it wasn't really a thing. But I think that's an element of it that I think's been not explored so much. And it's kind of it's almost, I don't want to say romantic, you know what I mean? But it's kind of it's like imagine being so deeply entrenched in that.
I mean, however many series I don't know how much they can get out of this. I mean, if we get to the third season, are we all going to start like cheering when the guy finally becomes like the serial killer at the end? Just we know he doesn't.
That's the problem with docudramas that we know he doesn't. So.
Yeah, because we would have heard of him.
If only real life would match. But
docudrama, not like docu.
No. But there are shows that, like speaking about Dr. Lecter, Hannibal, that show is.
I've never watched it.
Oh, don't! I literally watched it because I'd seen Mason Troyer, the guy that Gary Oldman plays in the movies.
Okay.
I saw Michael Pitt was playing him, and I thought that's something I really want to see.
Okay.
But it's literally the last 2 seasons, and I watched all of it to get to that point, and it is just like CSI Baltimore. It is just like nobody really makes statues out of people, right? It maybe happened once or twice, but it's not really a thing.
Okay.
So why? But then it's the 4th guy that does it, and you're just like, no, imagine the smell. Come on, like it's not. It kind of. I don't know. It's this thing that kind of glamorizes it as well, which I don't like.
No.
I think it's interesting to study them, and it's an interesting thing that people do. I
think that's why Mindhunter is such a powerful TV series, because we get to see that. Obviously, they talk about how the rise of, they hadn't coined it at that time, but the serial killer. It's something that's they've went from this sort of 1950s atomic family, you know, suburbia, and just everything's nice, and there's not really, I mean, a few rapes back in the day is what it was, but that's all they had to deal with. But it's the FBI having to like create a whole division around a new type of killer coming about, and that's societal, I guess. Is it society's fault that they're becoming like that, or
are we just noticing it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is it always been like, you could probably say some kings from back in the day were, you know, serial killers, probably. Or
what was the guy that, what's his name? One of Queen Boadiceu's generals. Was it Boadicea?
Did they know anything about her? I didn't know.
I'm getting confused, getting my history confused.
Joan
of Arc, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Joan
I think,
of Arc,
yeah.
maybe. One of her like generals was like a known guy who was traveling around Europe committing all manner of atrocities.
No,
George Bernard Shaw.
I don't remember the name, but
doesn't sound very French.
George Bernard Shaw not an author?
Okay, I think that's somebody. I just typed in something.
Scott's throwing us all off with his obscure history reference.
I know.
Damn.
Didn't mean to. But no, I remember that rings a bell. Definitely, there was a guy that was kind of. And then they read his journals.
Gilles de Rais. Okay, he was the general companion in arms of Joan of Arc. He's best known for his reputation and later conviction of serial killer of children.
Yeah, that was it.
Wow.
That's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah. It's not as if there weren't people doing this.
Yeah,
it's maybe the whole, you know, the cool off and the minimum number.
Was there not a woman serial killer, and they say she was like the most prolific one of history? She was like a queen or something like that.
Oh, Anne Boleyn. Yeah, was it Anne Boleyn?
She just killed loads of children, and eventually they put her in jail for the rest of her life.
Well, there was a woman in London that would adopt babies, telling the mothers they were going to give them a good life, and then she would strangle them. I can't remember.
Elizabeth Bathory.
Bathory, that's it. Yeah.
Did she not literally? Oh, she was a Hungarian noble woman and an alleged murderer as well. But she killed like more than 300 people supposedly, which is crazy.
So yeah, I'm.
How do you even know that stat back then? You know, how do you know? Maybe they just chalked her up to a lot of other things.
Yeah. Well, they say that
she killed one.
There's something.
Just took her word for it.
Because I listened to the
definitely 300.
Because I listened to the podcast with Bobby, and you're speaking a lot about history, and it rang a bell. Dan Carlin does the hardcore histories. He said in one of his long podcasts, he said history is becoming more of a science than a philosophy.
Right. Okay.
So I think now we're getting better at knowing how many, like the quantitative side of history now.
Okay.
It's becoming less of we think, it's becoming more we know.
Right.
And he was speaking about it in terms of it's good because we have more of a factual basis for knowing what happened, but we're kind of moving away from the kind of theorizing and the kind of.
But is that due to sort of time moving forward, and what becomes history is when we had more like science was around then at that time, or is it the science of going back further has become better? You know,
I think we have to do less guesswork. I think that was the point of it. The technology has advanced that we can do stuff like it's gone beyond carbon dating. Now we can look at it. But then obviously you've kind of got the philosophy side of it as well. You're kind of trying to get the kind of human element of it as well, like reading stuff like diaries and stuff like that.
I think history did have a reputation as an academic subject of being my argument versus your argument, and we'll see who can get the better sources to back up their argument.
But essentially that comes down to how well you speak. You know, that's not, and how well you debate. That's not to do with your facts. That's terrible. You know, like has history history been decided over how well someone could recall something? You know, that's crazy.
100%. But I think to a lesser extent, science is a lot like that as well. So Ben Goldacre's Bad Science run of books in his blog, and his recent campaign to get sort of negative test results and negative studies published as well.
Okay.
It's like you only ever see the positive side, the studies that worked. You don't see the studies that didn't work. Yeah. So, but you need to see those.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a very good point.
I've tried to explain this before in one of the podcasts I did with Laura, but I was like, it's not just like everyone's trying to get to this one point with the same ideas when it comes to something like, you know, discovering the DNA helix and the atomic bomb, like, you know, discovering like, you know, how to do that and divide it and whatever. There was all these other like competing theories that never came to fruition that quite easily could have been like the paradigm at that time. You know, if they'd succeeded somehow. And what do we not know about history? You know, we know so much more of what we don't know about history than what we do know.
Yeah, there are no knowns. There are unknown knowns.
More unknown knowns.
Yeah, exactly. Fucking Dick Cheney. Yeah.
Was that Cheney or was that Rumsfeld?
Really?
Was it one of the?
One of the ones that doesn't.
One of the warmongers.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that doesn't have a pulse.
That's scary, man. That's like it's like something out of the Bible, isn't it?
Well, it is. Like, it's supposedly
Really?
they said that was they think that's when the Antichrist was coming, because they said something that alluded to someone that didn't have a pulse or beating heart. And obviously Dick Cheney had like his thing where it's just constantly pumped his blood around his body. I wonder if there's any like physical effects of that. Are you just constantly like,
I don't know. Doesn't need to sleep.
Bomb this place, bomb that place, bomb this place.
Well, he doesn't have a heart, so there we go.
Yeah.
The old Tin Man.
Exactly. But now, history is something I'm kind of past. I'm not interested in history. It's just something I'll usually grab my interest. Like, I watched a really interesting TED talk a while ago about how Jesus might not have existed.
What do you mean? He didn't exist.
Well, they're
literally. Sorry, this is one of the ones that pisses me off.
Really?
Like, there literally isn't any evidence for a Jesus. Like, not even in a historical sense. There's less evidence for anything. Like, he wasn't like a Messiah and a supernatural being. There is no physical evidence.
Exactly. And there's records from those times that make no mention of him. You think you would mention a dude wandering into town healing the blind and the sick. You know, you think that would come up.
Well, there's contemporary historians that never mentioned anyone. Like, I think the most... I think one of the most sort of general mentions of him was someone talking about like a sort of a Jewish prophet. I think they talked about, but there were so many Jewish prophets around at that time. There was lots of Jesuses as well. Like there was ones that they could actually put down in history, but none that was supposed to be from the Bible. They can't figure it out. I think, but that's one of the ones that's still part of the current paradigm, is that even if you don't believe in God and the Bible, you still think that Jesus was a real person. You know, he might have done like a few like prophetic things, but he wasn't supernatural in any sense. But there's nothing. And Laura gets on me because she says you can't prove a negative, but
I think it's fairly well accepted outside of fundamentalist circles that Jesus and most of the Bible is an amalgam of things that may have happened through rumour. Yeah. And they've been put together to tell a cohesive story.
Exactly.
In the same way that you'll have some crazy dreams and you'll piece it together, think it's one dream, but it's not. It's just a bunch of...
Well, the way I understand it, it's Jesus was a bunch of things that were put in story to sort of foretell the Jewish prophecy. And I think... if you look at the story of Joseph, he was the proto-Jesus. Like, a lot of his things align with what happened to Jesus later on. Yep. And, yeah, for some reason they didn't want to use him. So then when they got to Jesus, that was when they sort of thought, oh, he is the prophet.
Hey, Joseph, you're cut. You're not doing it.
And you don't get to have your own son either.
Your marriage to this 14-year-old is not doing it for us. We're going to skip that bit.
But this is something I'm determined to bring up whenever we start speaking about religion, especially when it comes to Christianity and religious belief people that we know what I have. When I say like stuff like Jesus didn't exist, or I point an inconsistency in any kind of religion, I'm not saying in any way you shouldn't believe that. Like, I see, although it's not a part of my life, it's not something I identify with, I definitely see moments, whether it's in TV or in real life, where somebody's faith is very helpful to their things they need to get over. Like, obviously people are fasting for Ramadan right now.
Yeah.
Lent's still going or just finished or whatever. And I used to be of the mind that people of our generation weren't religious, and I would spout off about this kind of stuff all the time, about how God's bullshit and all this kind of stuff. But then I started to realize that there are people of our generation that are still very religious, and it's kind of disrespectful. The conversations like this I'm not saying we're being disrespectful, I'm just saying I'm always clear to point out there's a difference between anti-theism and atheism. And I've got a tremendous lot of respect for people that can use their faith to find a strength within themselves that they couldn't otherwise access or didn't feel that they could otherwise access. And I just feel, I don't know.
I don't identify as an atheist, you know. But, I think I've spoken about this before. When I read The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins, I think that made me. I thought I was an atheist up until I read that, and then I was like, no, I'm agnostic in the sort of the literal sense of the word, because I don't know, like a scientist would never say this is like an empirical fact without any evidence. So it's not that there might be evidence. Like I don't think there is evidence for a God. There never will be, but you can never totally be like, no, this is like 100% truth with that unless you can prove it.
Yeah.
And agnostic is where I fall. And I think Richard Dawkins even said, like, on the scale, he would be agnostic, leaning heavily towards atheism. You know, that's just the way he thinks. But if you think about it in its technical terms, you can never truly say you're an atheist, I think, you know.
No. I've been pretty happy saying secular humanist for the past couple of years.
That's brilliant, you know.
It's a big part of my family as well. So it's something I feel... I don't, labels are only useful
arbitrary.
to a certain point, but yeah, I feel like secular humanist kind of fits in how I feel about not just theological things but social things as well. I feel
but that gives an outlook to someone who you say that to, that gives you sort of like a built-in list of what your thoughts might be about certain things. You know, you're about like promoting and being a human, you know, and doing the right things. You know, that's the thing. And that's good to say that to someone, because then that gives the idea of that.
It does.
Whereas if you just say you're an atheist, that doesn't give you an inkling to, you might have thoughts on, you know, pollution and all this sort of thing, you know, and treating each other with respect. That doesn't give any idea towards that, I guess.
And
probably on your side as well with agnosticism, just because a lot of my thoughts come from trying to be rational and scientific about things. The whole way that the anti-science movement's going is talking about how it's just a theory, you know, and the real way that works is everything's a theory. Everything has to be disprovable for it to be scientific. And that's the way that I think about the existence of God or a higher power. I'm certainly not going to live my life as if I'm going to meet him or her or whoever.
Them.
They.
Sorry.
The big they in the sky.
We shouldn't assume the pronouns, but I think in the true sense of the word, I don't think you can know. I think it's unknowable. Maybe there's nothing, or maybe there's something, and we're not going to find out till we're dead. So what does it really matter? Like it shouldn't have any bearing on how you live your life just now. If you focus on being a good person, like we were talking about earlier, if you focus on being a good person and speaking to people and being empathetic, that's themes that run through all major religions anyway.
Exactly.
And what's the chicken and egg situation when it comes to that? Like, is that what humans have always tried to aspire to? So when they put it in a form of a story, for them people to go and then worship and say they think that that's where it comes from, but it's not. Like, it's just the human condition. Like, we always want, when we get to a place of civility, we want to be nice to each other. That's just something that comes out of us, you know. Exactly. Like, it's what we want to aspire to be better, obviously, when we become a civilization. So when people wrote that into stories, people start to think that's where it comes from, but it's not. It's just us putting those things into to written words, you know.
And it's when those things become restrictive to the choices people want to make that we repeal them, like in Ireland very recently.
Exactly.
And we tend to correct these kind of things as well. Like, there's a big part I like about Judaism where they kind of say where science disproves something in, you know, Jewish texts, science supersedes it.
Right. Okay.
And I really like that. I wish one was more like the other, but I'm just saying that's a pretty cool idea. I'll leave it at that. I won't draw.
Have you? It's such a strange one. Like, obviously, Judaism is a religion, but is also seen as a race of people as well. That's such a blurry line. About something I've always try and figure out which one is which. But I guess they're both. I guess, you know, is it?
Yeah. I think you have. I mean, there are like someone I know recently did one of those. Was it 23andMe?
Right. Okay.
Things? Yeah, they did one.
The DNA thing. Yeah.
And there is it came back because this person does have Jewish heritage, and she was saying that the majority of the genealogy that came back was a certain. It starts with an A. Yeah, I think people listening know what the word is. You won't be able. You might be able to say it.
I think because I talked about it before with Laura, and she was talking about generally Jews are sort of a religion, but there is a sort of sect of Jewish that is a race, you know.
Is the right word Aramaic?
No, it's AZ something.
Say genetic Jews.
Yeah, but it's like from Europe and
Hasidic? No,
Hasidic. That's a type of Judaism.
Yeah, that's the type of.
But no, sorry.
No, I was about to say, I'm sure there's more to being a Hasidic Jew than what I recall, but I didn't know anything about this.
Ashkenazi?
Ashkenazi, that's it. Yeah.
And there's also Sephardi Jews as well. So yeah, that's the two sort of main groups that came out of wherever.
There you go. That's an example of an unknown unknown. That was a thing.
Exactly.
Did not know.
But
have you been to Berlin?
No, I've never been to Berlin. No, I think you just were there recently, weren't you?
No, I was in Munich.
Okay.
Munich, yeah.
Munich's awesome. Had some great times in Munich actually.
Hospitality is incredible.
I know, it's so nice. I went to the Jewish Museum in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a heavy day. You know, it's like where it is. Obviously, is in a place where they were sort of killed en masse. Not there, obviously, but it's when you go to it, you know, you can feel the gravity of what you're entering into and why it's there and what they're trying to show you. And they focus on the history of Jewish people throughout all the civilizations and why they've always been like outsiders to different civilizations. It goes really in depth and it was brilliant. So if anyone's in Berlin, go to the Jewish History Museum. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
No, something I would say of all the three Abrahamic religions, it's the one I know the least about. Yeah. And it's because I don't get a lot of exposure. It's
exclusivity as well, though.
A little bit.
You know, they don't have outsiders generally inside Jewish. You know, you have to be born Jewish.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. You have to be born of a Jewish.
It feels literally a world away, though.
It does. But I mean, I have a Jewish friend, and I remember saying
token to her, Jewish friend.
She'll get a kick out of that. Actually. I remember saying to her years ago, like, you're the only Jewish person I know, and she went, I'm the only Jewish person that's told you they're Jewish.
Wow.
So that's an interesting point. I never thought about it that way, but it's probably the case that it just doesn't come up. How often do you have a conversation where you go, "Hi, I'm Scott. I am a." You know, you never have that conversation really.
You can identify obviously with like Muslims generally. You know, obviously they're of a certain skin color because they come from a certain part of the world. Generally, you know, just when you think about the stereotypical version of it, and I guess with Jewish people that's not an indicator. You know, you can't physically look at someone and be like, "Oh, you're Jewish," really, unless they're wearing the what's it called, the
yarmulke.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's not a physical part of their body either. So,
but to be honest with you, the majority of the things I know about Judaism are from a friend and from Ben Shapiro. Those are the only two sources I really have.
Can we not talk about Ben Shapiro?
Why not? What's wrong with Ben Shapiro?
Nah, I'm joking. I used to find him sort of useful, and then I kind of outgrew what he was talking about, I guess. I feel like he's a bit, I don't know, there's something that irks me about him slightly. I did like him for a while. I thought he was really smart, obviously, and articulate. You know, he can speak really well, and that comes from being a Jewish lawyer, I guess. And
very quickly as well. He speaks very fast.
But there's a lot of things. He seems really autistic for some reason.
I see what you're getting with that. I mean, I actively try and, like we were speaking earlier about confirmation bias. I actively try and seek out opinions I know I'm going to disagree with. Yeah. And to that end, you know, Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder, Gavin McInnes as well. Yeah. I do listen to some of their content, the free content they put out, primarily because I kind of want to hear opinions I know I'm probably not going to agree with, and I do hear some that I do agree with. I mean, obviously those three, namely, the reason I brought them up is because they're pro-choice, pro-life. Yeah. And I'm with the conversation. We're obviously all three of us pro-choice.
And with Crowder, it's pro-gun as well. You know, which is weird because he's Canadian.
No, Canadians are like. Why is that weird though?
Because he's like pro. You know,
Gavin McInnes as well.
Yeah, but he's not Canadian, is he?
I don't see why gun rights is a right wing thing. I don't see why.
No, I'm saying conservative. Like it's a conservative thing.
But I don't see why private gun ownership is a right wing talking. I don't see why it's identified.
There's no right wing liberals, is there?
I think that's kind of a contradiction.
Exactly. So, when you're conservative, you know, that's a form of being like the Constitution, you want to conserve that as well as like your country as well, and that leads to championing the rights of like gun ownership. That is like conservatism and gun ownership is tied together. And there's probably more right wingers that are conservative, than they are liberal.
But why is gun ownership a right wing?
Because it's a point of contention.
Was there not? I was thinking about Joe Rogan there because listening to his podcasts and springing off and listening to people that have been on his show, you see that there's maybe a difference between fiscally conservative and socially conservative.
Yeah.
And I think Joe Rogan had made the distinction a few years ago where he said he is socially very liberal.
Yeah.
And then maybe financially and in other aspects a bit more conservative.
It's because he's a millionaire.
Yeah.
Could be. There might be a correlation there.
Nah, I love Joe. Like,
listen,
I've grown.
Patron saint of podcasts, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the guy that started it all.
Podfather.
There we go. That's a better one. I like that. Patent pending.
He has changed my life in a lot of ways. Listening to him for however long he's been on.
Me too, man.
And but you start to like diverge slightly from him. He's older, he's like 50 whatever years old. He's going to have a slightly different. He's still liberal as anything for people I know that age from that type of place in the world.
Which probably comes from the amount of pot he smokes.
Yeah. And being from Boston, like he has the dynamic of the West Coast and the East Coast.
Yeah, definitely.
But still, there's some things like the way he stands on like I can't remember who he had on the podcast. And he was totally going off on like socialism and even communism. Obviously, it's like a.
That sounds like a Jordan Peterson episode.
No, it was some guy who was like conservative and wrote on like blogs and all that. It was a while ago, and they were just like dissing like social.
Was it Douglas Murray?
I'm not sure. I can't remember the name, but they were like talking about universal income, just totally ripping it at that point. And I think that's after that when Joe started to think about it and look into it that he thought it was maybe a good thing, obviously.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember his name.
And I was it was one of the first times I've listened to his podcast and been like infuriated, just like he's just pandering to this person. Like it feels like he's phoning it in. Obviously you're going to have at least a few podcasts out of thousands that you're going to phone it in slightly and just agree just to get on with it,
Well, I think I know what you're getting at, because there's one Joe Rogan podcast from the early days I've listened to a lot, and it's Brian Callen, Joe Rogan, Dr. Peter Duesberg.
Okay.
Do you remember Dr.
Is that
Peter
the guy
Duesberg?
that had the HIV guy?
Yeah, the HIV. The HIV is a harmless passenger virus, this guy.
And science doesn't really know what it is. It's not one thing.
Exactly. If you listen to that podcast, it's quite interesting. I think you hear both of them start and going, listen, we both know people that have died of HIV, both people have died of AIDS. Yeah. You got some fucking explaining to do. But at the end of it, Brian Callen seems like he's been talked around, and Joe's very much, resting on his chin, kind of.
Yeah.
So I think there's a degree of that as well. I think Joe Rogan, a lot of it is seeing what the person's going to say, then he'll check it up later on, because he does comment on podcasts he's had before. But I've had listened to podcasts and I actively search these out. I kind of try that feeling you're speaking about. I try and promote that. Like, I quite like Jordan Peterson. I've got quite a lot out of listening to his content. And I really enjoy listening to people speaking about what they don't like about him.
Well, he's like a bit of a buzzword just now.
He is indeed, but I've not heard anyone make a
rational argument against him.
The best argument I've had, he looks, I can't remember who it was, somebody was a Facebook post or something saying he looked like someone's creepy uncle or something like that. That's the best. He's a supremely honest person, and I think it's difficult to say anything bad about it. You can speak how he speaks. I think some of his language is a bit too elaborate, and he is kind of inaccessible.
He's the head of the psychology department at Toronto University. This guy knows his stuff. He's not just like some guy who has a degree in something that's trying to like do social commentary. He legit has got his finger on the pulse about the stuff he's talking about. I
think the problem with that though is there's still quite a big separation between academic subjects and real life and the way that they apply. So he knows his stuff when it comes to psychology. Yeah. He knows far more. I studied psychology. I've got a terrible degree in psychology. He knows far more than I do, of course. But when it comes to applying those theories to real life, there's a massive difference between lab work and what's the word for studies done in real life?
Field work.
Anthropology. Ethnopolo.
God damn. You know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between those two.
It's them book learning words.
The big learning words. I've not put them all together. I've not used them in a while. But there's a massive difference, and I think I can probably speak on both sides of the Jordan Peterson thing, because on the surface level, when he starts talking about things, I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
On the transphobic comments, I kind of agree with him in that you shouldn't be forced by law to refer people as certain things.
Of course.
You shouldn't. And that's where his argument went, and that's where a lot of his supporters are like, no, we support him on that. And he now says, I wouldn't refuse to call anyone whatever they ask me to. I'm just not going to do it by law.
Yeah. I don't think he ever said he wouldn't from the start, though. That's the thing. Really?
Yeah. So I was curious about this. So I looked up the earlier interviews.
Right.
And there's a number of interviews on Canadian television where he said he's been in shouting matches with people. There's one specific where there's someone on the other end of the phone who says, hey, if it's really hard for you to keep track of, just keep the pronouns in the phone book next to their name on your mobile, blah, blah, blah. And he was saying, like, it's not that hard to keep track of. It's not a big deal. And Jordan was saying, no, I won't call someone by their pronouns.
What was he?
But like, if you think about it, though, like, calling someone by their pronouns, the way that group were talking about it was that it's super fluid and those things can change daily.
Yep.
And that's not something that's it's not viable or feasible.
That's what I mean about both sides. I can see both sides. Yeah. So I can see the side of him that's saying, like, when
you're trying to promote something, sometimes you have to take a stance on something, which generally everyone wouldn't take, and probably if he wasn't trying to make that argument, he probably wouldn't take a hard stance like that. But when you have to, like, sort of, die on your shield and die on your sword and go out on your shield, you have to make those lines to then, make a point, I guess.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's what he's doing now. But he's glossing over previous things that he has said, and he's now saying that he never said.
Well, that's disingenuous.
The interviewer said, if you had a student who asked you to call her a she, and you knew her as a male before, would you refuse? And he said yes. And that's diametrically opposed to what he's saying now. And so I appreciate and agree with what he's saying now, but I don't think he's being wholly I don't think he's being wholly genuine with where he's coming from.
Well,
I think the last time he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, Joe dug a little bit deeper into why he thinks what he thinks. Yeah. And at the end of 2 hours, it came down to religion. Well, it's because I'm a staunch Christian.
Yeah, that's my bone of contention with him. That's my bone of contention, is his sort of views, his creepy sort of views on religion. I mean, what I took from his first podcast with Joe was that he was sort of using it as it's a tool from literary history. Sorry, that's a hard one for me to say. So you can take, like, it as, like, fables and things to learn from, but it just seems like in that last one it was sort of getting close to sort of being, he's a genuine Christian. And if you're a psychologist and a scientist, I guess would you be a scientist if you're a psychologist of some sort?
Well, that's a bone of contention, isn't it?
But the only reason we know this is because he said it, though. The only reason we know this is because he came out and admitted that this is a bias that I have, and it took him a while to come out with it.
But we all have biases, what I'm saying? That's the thing.
Indeed.
You can't have someone who's perfect. That's why I think it's weird that when presidents have things in their past or things come out, like, you can't have this pure thing.
What presidents, Dan? What president could you be speaking about? Yeah, actually,
except Obama.
Oh, Clinton.
Oh, he smoked weed.
No, Did Obama not say that he was very, very close to using heroin?
And he admitted to dealing coke at the Valley.
Well, he did. Well, he was smoking a dip in one of his famous black and white pictures, which was probably photoshopped by Trump at that point.
Nah, it's all a CIA psyop. I've seen it. I've got the paperwork. I've got the documents.
I'm gonna have to
was going to do it the hard way. I'll just take the battery out.
It's all right. We're back. We just all went for a joint pee session.
Yeah.
Not a joint, but a pee. Yeah.
He says joint pee session because he's got a massive toilet. So we could all go at the same time.
It's pee in the shower. I think that's how you do it. Is it not?
Laura's not going to listen to this, is she?
She's probably watching live on YouTube, actually.
We're live?
Yeah, of course.
Laura, none of us have peed in your shower, just to say.
I don't actually know we were going live until the one the way up here.
What, have you not known that we stream on YouTube?
Oh, I listened to them on Podbean, so I didn't really know that.
Ah, you're that one person that listens to it.
Is it? No, I'm that one guy, that niche market.
No.
So we're just speaking in the break about Darren Till. He has made weight. He has, yeah. He had to make £188 by 1 p.m. and he's made £188 by 1 p.m.
Do we want to dial it back a little bit?
We'll bring it back to Bellator 200 because that actually happened. I was on a podcast during the week. I don't know if you know about it. It's martial arts podcast.
Okay.
It's like a Scottish show where they just do like predictions and talk a little bit, and they've had some great like UFC fighters on it as well. So just check it out.
Definitely.
Not because I'm on it, obviously, but it's a Scottish one. But they get American guys on via Skype. I made my predictions, obviously, and I seem to have got like a few wrong. But this was obviously when Crow Cup was fighting
Roy Nelson.
Yeah, Roy Nelson. And my predictions for the main card were obviously Phil Davis was going to beat Vassal, and I thought he was just going to like pull out a submission because he's not done that in a while, and he's a very good wrestler, obviously, and no one's going to wrestle him. I thought Aaron Chalmers is obviously going to win, but they got into a whole thing about Geordie Shore and what do we think about someone from Geordie Shore being on this, and I just thought you have to take it fight by fight. He's going to bring people to the sport, maybe not the ones that you want to watch the sport as well. That's not a big
everyone
thing.
should watch the sport.
Yeah, of course.
As long as they don't post online,
I thought Jared Masasi was going to get beat in a decision.
Really?
By Carvalho, because I thought they were sort of matched in a way where he's got a lot of miles on him.
Yeah.
But experience, but I didn't think he had it in him anymore. Maybe just to go and win this one.
Why, just
and
based off
Carvalho is the champ, and he's like very explosive. So I think it's going to be a back and forth.
Was that just off his last fight with Shlemenko, or was that?
I think he hasn't notoriously had like runs, Masasi, and then the fight that he needs to win, he notoriously always loses it. And I thought this would be the one where how many has he won before this? I think he's like 5 or something.
Oh yeah,
this is his first sustained run.
Okay,
at the top. Sort of thing.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, he kind of ran into King Mo. Well, he ran into Jacare. Then he had a bit of a run. Then he ran into King Mo.
I think first Jacare ran into his foot.
Yeah, that's a horrible knockout as well. The way he punches him on the ground is. No, sorry, he beat Jacare. I get that one backwards. Yeah. Sorry, I got that one backwards. That was it. Sorry, yeah. So it was King Mo that beat him, gave him his first loss, wasn't it?
That's right.
So you're right. Yeah, good point. But I just feel as people were really, really hard on Masasi after his last fight. But he tore his knee or tore his shoulder in the first couple of minutes. Shlemenko was game, man. He's
explosive as fuck.
Spinning shit.
People are talking about Shlemenko as if he's like a mid-tier guy. Shlemenko should be a top-tier guy, but he got...
aged 10 years.
No, sorry, I thought you were talking about Carvalho there.
No,
that's why I said
Masasi,
explosive.
Shlemenko had a weird positive test for banned substances that he was still fighting. He was like, can we please test my B sample because I didn't test for this, and they refused to.
What?
Yeah. You can look it up afterwards, or
it seems like they
can look it up just now.
They have like a sort of like a thin veneer of testing where they on the front of it they test, but they don't have the infrastructure to then retest when something comes up. Whereas the UFC like has the money to do that. I guess that's maybe something to do with it.
I think Shlemenko was repeatedly saying that he never tested positive, etc., but he had to serve a year ban or a 2-year ban or something like that. And he's come back and he's not a top level fighter anymore, I don't think, but like beforehand, Shlemenko should have been top level. Shlemenko's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think people are cutting it a little bit fine to say that Masasi should have beat him by a wider margin.
Yeah.
But I think some of the fights you've picked there are some of the more brutal ones. So Phil Davis, he nearly took Vassal's head off.
I know, that head kick
was a decapitation.
I know.
He's a surprising fighter, Phil Davis. You think he's quite boring, but he's just... It depends who he's fighting against. It depends how... He tends to rise to the occasion. He's one of those guys. So you have a guy like the Ryan Bader fight in particular wasn't the most interesting of fights to watch. But that's because Ryan Bader is quite defensive and doesn't really engage in the right... I think the rub on Phil Davis is his best wrestling comes out when somebody tries to wrestle him, and that's when he tends to get the better positions and tend to get like... I'm trying to think of a good example.
So he has like defensive wrestling.
Indeed. There's a whole thing about... getting against the cage and defending the takedown from there, and then getting to top position from there. That's kind of his specialty.
He'll reverse it. Yeah,
exactly.
Was it Phil Davis that had the one arm key lock?
Yeah, he had the the key lock behind the back.
Yeah,
I mean that takes
was it Tim Boach?
Tim Boach, I think.
Really, that's a hell of a guy to do it to as well.
I think it was Tim Boach.
Fucking big
I
Tim.
think that was
one arm key lock. Ridiculous.
That's why I thought he might
Wonderful.
pull out like a submission because he's got one in the past that he might pull out because he gets the position.
Yeah. Well, he handed Gustafsson his first loss as well by Anaconda choke. So yeah, he does.
And he obviously, and then he went to train. Obviously, Gustafsson went to train with him, and that's where he became even better. You know, his wrestling just went through the roof.
Definitely.
He took John Jones down from going to train with Phil Davis.
No, that's because John Jones didn't train for that fight. No.
Was it you and I talking about that, or was it me and someone else talking about John Jones? He's never quite reached his prime, which is ridiculous considering what we've seen.
But has he? Has he not? Is that an excuse he's using so he doesn't want to disappoint people? Maybe he's telling himself that because he thinks he's got more left to prove.
Maybe.
Or maybe he has.
You think cocaine makes him a better fighter?
Cocaine makes anyone a better fighter.
Makes anyone a better anyone. No,
have you never seen a club on a Friday or Saturday night?
It's full of top class.
Exactly. Very motivated individuals.
That's from my own perception of John Jones. I think he'd said to Gustafsson on Twitter, Gustafsson was calling him out saying, hurry up and sort your life out, I want to see you again. And John Jones had said, calm down. I beat you with 12 days training and loads of cocaine in my system.
But he says that really to everything anyone says.
Yeah.
It seems like he's just trying to put an excuse there. So when he does train, maybe he can sort of moralize it to himself that he is doing better. I don't know.
And it would be funny if he did get his stuff together and then turns into a shit fighter. It'd be kind of funny.
Imagine he went to I think Greg Jackson's is sort of diluted slightly in their quality, and imagine if he'd went to another place after he hit that pregnant lady.
Go to American Kickboxing Academy, get some injuries.
But I feel we can't see him going to American Kickboxing.
I'm joking.
That's a terrible example.
I know. I'm
taking a
piss.
Buddy up.
Daniel Cormier. I know.
We're digressing.
We are digressing. Sorry.
We're on Bellator at this
Bellator.
Sorry.
I was talking about you'd pick brutal examples. So you've got Phil Davis decapitating a man.
Yes.
What was the next one? Arnold Chalmers used the proper John Jones walk off.
Well, he had the stand guillotine choke. Was it the 5-finger choke he did, or was it an actual guillotine?
I've not seen his grip, but he nearly pulled the guy's head off and dropped him on the canvas.
What do you think about it? What is your views on him and him being a fighter in Bellator? Do you think he's getting any sort of slack?
So I'm nowhere near his weight class nor his skill level.
You're not trying to fight him, are you?
No, but I know people in Scotland who think watch him and they think I could beat him. I should be fighting him. And I think all respect to those people.
But is that because of what show he was on?
Yeah, all respect to those people. I think they're discounting the fact that he has actually put the time in and he's tried to be a good fighter.
If you're on Bellator, you've had the minimal amount of training to then be able to beat up 90% of the people on the street. That's just the way it is. And
he might have got there because of his ticket sales, but I think I'm maybe speaking out of turn because I've not done any research on his opponent. But if you beat someone on Bellator, it's not a bum show,
But they're obviously, I think they are feeding him slightly. They're not giving him cans because if you don't think he's a good fighter, then anybody that's of any quality could then beat him potentially.
Yeah. They're maybe not feeding him cans as much as they are Michael Page.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Well, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
There is a point.
My thought in the whole Aaron Chalmers thing is he's not. I think he's had 3 fights before he got to to Bellator.
There's 3, all in Bama.
He's not came up through a small promotion. He's his pro career's unfolding on a massive stage.
Yep.
And I think we just have to take it for what it is. Like, he has to progress somehow. He's not be given like the top tier guys straight away. But I mean, and we have to take stock of that and reel it in a little bit when we're sort of trying to talk about him, I guess. In general, not us. I mean, like, you know, and we have to take it fight by fight. Is the thing that I'm trying to get at.
What I will say is, sorry, Scott. No. One of the things that Scott and I were talking about when we were planning our own sort of MMA podcast was that.
Was it a good jabbin? You called it
Jabbin.
Jabbin. Kieran and Scott.
I think you should call it a good jabbin.
No. Good jabbin.
Do you want to explain why jabbin? I think jabbin is a bit more punchy.
Okay.
Well, hold on. I'll finish the thought first.
Finish your thought,
It's a short one. Me and Scott were talking about how MMA is quite a great equalizer. So you look at fighters and you can judge them on whatever merits you want, but when they get in the cage, you've got one metric. It's whether they win or lose. Yeah. You know, it's a great equalizer. And Chalmers, maybe you can say, oh, he's been fed cans, etc. But he's getting in there and he's showing up and he's training and he's winning. And his last fight on 200 was a dominant win.
And he's on weight. Yeah. And that's all you can ask of someone to
doing everything right.
Yeah. Outside of that, I mean, if he's bringing ticket sales and he's bringing a casual audience that hardcores of the sport might not appreciate, then, well, you're going to have to deal with that. That's what happens.
And he's obviously dealing with the pressure. You know, he's got a lot of stuff on his shoulders at this point. He's got the guys from being on TV, and then he's got the pressure from the MMA world, which is probably more as well.
You know, promotion only gets you to the fight. Promotion only gets you the fight with the opponent, and then, I mean, that's Chael Sonnen's career. You know, you think about it. You know, it's talking himself into the big fights, talking himself into a fight with John Jones and all this kind of stuff. So, if he gets found out, he gets found out. Like another good example would be Aaron Pico.
Yeah.
You know, big wrestling prospect, next big thing in MMA, knocked out in his first fight.
Yeah. Comes
back, knocks out 3 guys in a row now the same way, body shots.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just shows you, like, if someone's not up to scratch, CM Punk, they will get found out.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more hopeful about this next CM Punk fight, but I don't mean to sound dismissive. I'm a bit more.
When he fights Mayweather.
That's a more free. That's a more free fight. A more fair fight than you might think. If it's an MMA,
that's completely fair.
Yeah.
That's the only fight that CM Punk should have had from the start in MMA.
I think the guy who's fighting now is a lot more. I mean, Mickey Gall is a fucking beast. You know, it was.
Well, he's had years against someone who's been a wrestler. That should never. That's dangerous.
It was a brown belt versus a white belt.
In hindsight,
as a white belt, I know what it's like. I know what that looks like. You know. You know.
And okay, so the next one was obviously Michael Page. My prediction for that on that show was that it was going to be a knockout in the first round. Obviously, it went to the second, but Caveman tapped. Like, from just being
blood in his eye, wasn't
tapped to embarrassment.
No, embarrassment. Like, the guy Venom stepped in with a right and just caught him flush as Caveman was coming towards him, and he was like, I don't want to do this.
I think what happened.
But he did point to his eye.
Yeah,
but I think that was an excuse, obviously.
Well, Michael Page pointed to his eye first. He pointed to his eye and said, "You've been cut."
He cut, bruv. You've been cut, bruv.
Dave Rickles was like, "Yeah, nah, I'm cool. I'm out."
I just don't like it was like everyone saying MVP fights someone a bit better, and it's like, okay, I'll fight someone better. I'll lightweight. You know.
let's unpackage this. Obviously,
let's tear this apart because it's.
Obviously MVP, a lot of hope in him that he's gonna be the fighter that we all think he's going to be. You know, he's had an impressive amount of wins up here, but there is the impression that he's been fed people who are not as good as him. I mean, if you're a world champion in any sport, it doesn't matter. When you go to MMA, you've still got an advantage over everyone. This is what I always said about Ronda Rousey, is she's been an Olympic level judoka. The type of people she's fighting in MMA, doesn't matter what she's fighting them on or how she's winning, she still has that advantage because she's fought on the world stage. Her mindset is going to be different. Even that alone is powerful when you're fighting in MMA, you know, regardless of your skills. And then it just happened that she was a judoka, which transfers brilliantly into MMA. But yeah, the same thing applies. If you're on any combative stage on a world level and then you go to another place in MMA, you've still got a major advantage over everyone that you're going to fight initially.
But Ronda Rousey fought Miesha Tate in her fifth or sixth fight.
Is she not a wrestler? What was she had? Like a wrestling background?
She was a collegiate wrestler.
Yeah, that was it.
I'm just pointing out the difference.
But not Olympic level.
No, not Olympic level, but she did wrestle with men most of the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think what you're saying is the
difference
is that Ronda was
challenging herself.
Yeah. Well, there's an aside there about Miesha Tate. If we want to talk about gossip, but your point was about Ronda challenging herself, and she went up as far as she could in the amateurs, and then went pro, and she was immediately faced challenge because her division at that time was completely empty.
Yeah, she made that division. Mm-hmm. She brought people to it. Yeah, she brought her own challengers, but she's still at the top of the pile. That's.
I think when you compare that to our expectations for Michael Venom Page, he's an outstanding striker, like world-class striker, and it's amazing to watch him.
But even within his own sport, he's a complete phenom. Yeah. So that's why it's like in his what was it, kickboxing, karate he did. Yeah. He was a complete phenom in that.
WK,
I think a lot of the disappointment there comes from I want to see him do this against the best. Mm-hmm. I want to see if he can do it. It's the same with Wonder Boy.
But does the best for you constitute the UFC?
I think the best constitutes, at least in Bellator, a much higher level than he's been facing so far. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm a fan of Dave Rickles. Dave Rickles is incredible. Yeah, he's a great fighter at lightweight.
Very game.
Comes forward, well conditioned, and he looks like a fucking barbarian. He's great.
Very tough, and he doesn't back away.
Not at all.
Which we've seen in this, and that's probably why.
I think Venom. I thought Venom Page was going to use his toughness, Rickles' toughness against him. Because he's going to come forward, but he's going to take a lot of punishment, and that's what happened. He tapped because he was coming forward, and he was like game. Mm-hmm. It's the same with Khabib. Like he does it the same way with grappling. He uses your mental toughness against you. Like he did that with Barboza. Like Barboza, his face. But that's because he's tough. Yeah. And like
coming out for that last round, man, that's one of the bravest things I've seen. It's like, here we go again. Okay.
But I think shite pushed in here.
I think Venom Page, if he fights and he gets like further up the echelons, he's gonna do that to a lot of people. There's nobody. I said this on that other podcast. There's nobody that covers the distance the same way he does in his weight division or in Bellator or even the UFC.
That's why GSP is such an intriguing matchup for him, because both of them cover distance well, but very differently.
Did you just say GSP is an intriguing matchup for Michael Venom Page?
I started speaking about Khabib there for a second.
No, we're talking about. I was saying like
track there. Sorry, dude.
I've not heard this one.
You know what? That's too much of a jump. I was going to say Paul Daly's a bit of a jump for MVP.
We're still talking about MVP here.
So we got speaking about Khabib and I got heart eyes there for a second. MVP. I think the obvious matchup is Paul Daly. Yeah. It's getting to the point now where I think as fans we're all fucking fed up waiting for that fight.
Exactly. I mean, we still have the feeling that we have when Conor is scheduled to fight someone and it's like out with the division, and you're just frustrated because you want him to defend his titles and become like the champion that you think he should be, and then he goes off and does a boxing match. The same as like Venom Page. It's like, work your way up in MMA. We want to see you be great. Like everyone's behind you if you just do what you're going to do.
Yep. So where I was going was, if Scott Coker's listening, and hopefully he is, I don't blame him for giving Michael Venom Page a canvas that he can look brilliant on. That's fine. I appreciate that from a promotion standpoint. But as a fan, I want to see him do the same thing against a much more, like a much higher level opponent. Yeah. I want to see if he can do it. And I want to see, like, how amazing will that be to see him completely style on someone further at the top of the division.
But here's the kicker. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what age. So Michael Venom Page is 31.
31, yeah.
That's not young, And he's in a level of his career in Bellator where it doesn't seem like he's ever going to be in title contention or in the UFC at any point. But here's the kicker. Because of the way the sponsorship system is set up in the UFC and Bellator, obviously Bellator allows you to have your own sponsors. When you walk to the cage, your background is the sponsors you have throughout your camp. UFC is obviously sponsored by Reebok. Everyone takes a percentage of that. Do you think Michael Venom Page doesn't make the jump to UFC because he's making the money in Bellator?
Big part that must be a big part of it.
So it's a good point. It's a different dimension that you don't think about.
Because you think about it, it's not as if he shouldn't really be worried about being exposed, because he's probably one of the best strikers in MMA. His ground game isn't exactly non-existent. He does have a couple of wins.
A toe hold.
Which is weird. You kind of looked at the guy and just...
He's like, I'm toe holding
exactly.
you. The guy was like...
And it's not as if he just falls into these positions. There is definite setup and stuff. He's got a triangle choke and armbar victory as well. So he knows...
He's aware of positions.
His story about getting picked up in MMA was that promoters seen his ground game. Promoters seen him grappling.
Wow.
And said, this guy's solid. And then...
Little did he know.
Yeah. But sorry.
But then, my worry is he's going to end up like a guy like Alistair Overeem, where you spend his whole career thinking, I can't wait till this guy gets to the UFC, because he will get to the UFC eventually. And then he just I just feel as though, because of how old he is and because of his backstory in MMA, I feel as though when he has that inevitable first loss, it's going to be more difficult to recover from it, like it has been with Overeem. Like he kind of lost his mystique a little bit, because like the MVP is a mystique fighter.
If that loss happened in the UFC, it's more understandable. But when it happens in Bellator, it's like all the momentum's lost behind him.
Because Paul Daly has a very, very good chance of beating him.
If he catches him with that left hook, anybody with that left hook. Apart from Nick Diaz, obviously. But
I rewatched that fight recently.
Amazing fight.
Yeah,
amazing fight.
That's one of my favourite fights.
Do you know when he's got Daly up against the cage? And he's like throwing all these combinations up against him and hitting his body, and he fades back because he knows that Daly's coming back with the hook. It's just absolute beautiful like striking workmanship. Like Nick Diaz just
that fight has everything.
On the other side, what I was going to say there was, on the other side, you've got Paul Daly's performance that night against literally anyone else
would have knocked him out.
Would have destroyed them, and he nearly did at the start of the fight.
It's because he's got this half Cholo, half American thick skull, that you can't knock out.
Ridiculous.
Has he ever been knocked out?
Jeremy Jackson. Was by cut though. That was by cut.
What about TJ? Is it the Coons guy? What's his name?
KJ Noons. KJ Noons.
Did he knock him out?
I think KJ Noons beaten by TKO. I think
I think that was.
It wasn't a knockout
right,
though.
That was a stoppage.
Yeah.
No, Jeremy Jackson was a stoppage. Jeremy Jackson was by cut.
But you didn't knock him out. I don't think
KJ Noons was an out cold. I think that was a stoppage.
You think both by cut? Okay.
Not by cut, but I think it was a stoppage.
Yeah, like TKO, like punches.
And he was in the news recently as well. Nick Diaz.
Yeah,
for people who don't know, like obviously he's got a domestic abuse charge now. And what I last heard was it was on some YouTube channel anyway. They were saying the woman has a broken hip.
I also heard that it's a stalker. I heard a friend of his posted on Instagram saying that
three friends now.
Saying that this lady in question has been stalking him for a little while, not justifying
you don't beat up a
breaking
stalker
someone's
like that,
hip, because apparently it's very difficult to break. I know somebody of young age who broke their hip and it took quite a doing. Not literally.
It's like it's at the top of the chain in front of your is it your femur?
Breaking your femur.
Yeah, it's like the toughest one, but your hip's like even tougher than
exactly.
that.
So I mean,
I think the story goes on that is that she's been, not that he beat her up because she was being a stalker, but I think the story was that she was stalking him. He'd had to turn his phone off and ignore his phone for days on end because she would keep phoning him. She had some sort of app that would repeatedly dial him.
Oh, okay. It's wonderful to hear that happens after something like that.
So I think his agent, or his friend, his representative, so to speak, was saying that we've all been trying to convince him to press charges against this woman. And she was, if I'm remembering what I've read correctly, they were saying that she said she was going to report him to the police for domestic abuse.
Wow.
So if he didn't speak to her, and she was claiming that he gave me cancer, etc.
So this is this is something I do whenever this comes up, whether it's someone I know, someone I don't know, a celebrity. Wait. Before you develop a nuanced opinion about it, let's wait for all the facts to come out and for all the hearsay to be set to bed, because this is, when you hear the words domestic violence, you think a whole raft of things go through your brain. So I'm withholding judgment until more information comes out, because it seems a bit more complicated. The same thing with Travis Brown. Same thing.
Seems out of character for him. So I want to hear what has led up to supposedly that happening. supposedly he choked her unconscious. That was one of the things.
I love Nick Diaz, and I would be severely disappointed if it turned out that he'd beat a woman so bad that he choked her unconscious and broke her hip. Yeah, I would be the first person to say that he's a piece of shit. Yeah. But in this case, more than one person has come out and said there's actually two sides to this. So I want to hear them.
Exactly.
I want to know what's happening.
His friends are notoriously sort of cliquey though, and they very much love their friends, and they support each other no matter what. I mean, we've seen all the guys fighting inside
Strike Force.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we spoke about this
the other day. Gentlemen, we're on national television.
Yeah, that was
Sometimes, Scott, these things happen.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared, homie.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that was a great event.
I think that was probably cemented the love for the whole. Is it the Brat Pack?
The Scrap Pack. Scrap Pack. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, definitely. But they've kind of fallen by the wayside in the past couple of years. They don't seem as.
I think they went downhill.
I think the UFC sort of like diluted that whole thing. Yeah. Some of them have been fighting and some of them have not been. They're not all on the same organisation together, so it's a bit diluted. I guess they're doing their own things individually now.
Exactly.
I think around about the same time, you had Jake Shields at a press conference trying to steal someone's laptop. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
When they were throwing stuff at people,
I've met Jake Shields.
Really?
Yeah, like when I lived in Toronto, it was when John Jones fought Vitor, and it was in Toronto, and I went to go see that. But I was working at Extreme Couture Toronto, which is there's the Las Vegas one, and then there's the Toronto one. And when they had the open workouts for the UFC, it was in Extreme Couture. So like I met like a bunch of fighters. Like Bisbing was on that one as well.
Are you ready to say Jake Shields tried to steal your laptop?
Yeah. I met he was friends with the guy I was living with, who was the guy that owned the gym. Okay. And he came up to watch the fights, obviously, and we hung out with him. Like we went out and partied that night, and he's such a really nice guy, but all the clothes he wears is just like the sponsorship t-shirts he gets sent. He never wears anything else. But they're just like old and really tatty. Like he never changes them. He just that's all he wears.
I think that's professional fighter attire, isn't it?
Yeah, he was just hilarious. Totally. It was not because he was trying to represent. It was just like
that's the clothes.
Free fucking clothes.
But he was so nice, and I tried to show him. I felt bad about this later on, but I tried to show him there was a funny Tommy Toehold videos of the Diaz brothers, and obviously he's really good friends with them, and I was trying to show him one of the videos. And in hindsight I was like, why didn't he punch me in the face?
Yeah, look at this guy taking the piss out of your friends. Yeah.
Although that Tommy Toehold guy started doing some real MMA stuff. He's started doing, but there's real voice. there's a YouTube channel that they do long form videos that kind of cover various things in MMA. And he's one of them. He's done a couple of them because he says if you want to hear me speaking in my real voice, the Tommy Toehold.
It's brilliant. If anyone's not watched the Tommy Toehold series on YouTube, just go YouTube it and just and watch it. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
the GSP ones as well. When he does that, it's brilliant.
I've been a big fan of Tommy Toehold since he started. He reached out to middleeasy.com. I used to write for Middle Easy.
Wow, yeah.
And he reached out to us. And he says, I'm sure you get loads of this promotional stuff, but here's some cool videos I've done. Wow. And so we started featuring him because he's super funny.
He's brilliant.
And at that point, he was, putting out content every single week, funny content that you'd never heard of. And that's where all the Nick Diaz stuff came from and stuff. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tommy Toehold. It's ridiculous.
Jake Shields is actually a character on that as well. Jake Shields investigation.
Yeah, some personality.
It's kind of fishy.
Where I was going with that was Tommy's always got time on Twitter for fans and stuff.
And he's bald.
He's just a guy.
Yeah.
And he's bald.
Yeah.
That's relevant. But
topical.
I appreciate him. I appreciate him because he's constantly replying to people on Twitter.
No.
You look at his Twitter, his mentions and stuff, he's replying all the time. He's very active.
Yeah.
You've got to appreciate that. He's cool.
It's not a social platform that I can crack yet. I don't understand Twitter at this point. I'm trying, but it doesn't appeal to me. And it's like if something doesn't appeal to me, it's hard for me to then push myself to try and.
That's really funny that you've not cracked Twitter because a lot of the stuff that you talk about on podcasts with guests is stuff that I only know about from Twitter.
Yeah.
like the incel stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about that on Reddit.
Yeah.
The incel subreddit got banned for a while, so
Yeah.
So that's how I know about that. But a lot of the other stuff, the social justice stuff, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, I know about these guys through Twitter.
I know they're prominent on there.
Yeah.
But that it's just something I'm trying to do it. Like I maybe want to pay someone to do it for me or something. I just can't. I can't get my head around it.
Nice.
Okay, so we got to Michael Venom Page.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the main card was dealt with. So that's Bellator 200. What did you think on a whole? Did you like the card, or was it disappointing without the Crow Cop and?
Yeah. That was missing for me, definitely. That was the fight I was looking forward to.
Why do you think they went with that and not the Masashi fight as the main event?
It's the same reason they've been going for the older fighters in general. The Bellator's got the strategy, and maybe it's Scott Coker, maybe it's the guys above him. The older names pull rank, they pull ratings, and that's it. And Musashi is an incredible fighter, and there will be a proportion of people that recognise him as a UFC fighter and go, "Oh, we need to watch him fight." But far more people know Crow Cop, and far more people know Roy Nelson because he was on The Ultimate Fighter.
But we have to remember those two already had fought. Yeah. So that nostalgia thing had maybe sort of dissipated slightly, and they're in the UK as well. So do you think it was a bold move of some sort? You know,
I kind of get the. I find UK cards, European cards in general, but UK cards especially, tend to
not do well in my mind.
Not so much not do well. They just don't seem to be the best quality of cards.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the UFC that's on today, the UFC Liverpool.
Segue.
Very soon.
It's on very soon, yeah. A lot of boys coming off losses, especially on the main card.
Yeah.
A lot of boys. Like you tend to get this. You tend to get. So as far as the Bellator card's concerned, I quite enjoyed it. It was kind of what I was expecting. I try not to make too many predictions off of Bellator because I'm not super familiar with some of the recent history of some of the fighters, but I enjoyed it. I usually gauge it by how often I look at my phone as I'm kind of going to the event. I didn't look at my phone a lot during that event, so
yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Someone asked me on Twitter if I thought maybe Bellator deserved props for bringing a relatively strong card to the UK and doing it at UK time rather than pandering to the US audience.
That is a big thing. Like this was a question that was brought up on the podcast I was with, the martial arts one, as if it was a negative, but I thought it was like a bonus, like to be able to watch a fight at a reasonably, an hour where you can stay up and watch it and not be hungover for work the next day, you know.
See, I think that while it's commendable that they've gone, right, we're in UK, we'll show it at UK time, we're not going to show the main event at 3 a.m. because then we've got an arena full of super drunk people that are also tired. It's ridiculous. Like, that's cool. It's nice that they did that, but it shouldn't be exceptional. It shouldn't be.
No.
If the UFC come across Liverpool, this event is starting, maybe the Fight Pass prelims have just started now, roundabout now.
Is it not? Yeah, okay.
I think Elias Theodoro's up first. He should be fighting roundabout now. I'll probably get a notification on my phone as soon. But like, they should be catering to the local audience because they're the people that are there.
But they do it in a way.
It's not for the TV, it's for the people in the arena.
They go as far as to having people on from that area and the UK on the card to promote it, but they don't go as far as to sort of put it on the same time as it, and it seems sort of strange and convoluted. It's
the UFC have a bad reputation of completely disrespecting any audience outside the US, definitely. Which is fair enough from a promotional standpoint. Most of their money comes from the TV deals that they've got in the US. So, but I live in the UK and I'd like to. Yeah.
But the pay-per-view is coming from the country it's in.
Yeah.
So that's a thing to sort of, but they have to make that up somehow. Obviously, UK is a small island with a small percentage of people watching, I guess.
Yeah. But it's roughly on the same time zone as most of Europe.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess it's how much credit they give, how much weight they put to.
But are they about making money, or are they about providing extreme entertainment at a reasonable hour?
I think at the moment they're about making money because they have to be, because 100%. Month to month.
Supposedly the ESPN deal, supposedly that's like in the proximity of 300 million that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's well
money.
Needed. It's definitely well needed. There was talk about.
Do you think do you think it'll legitimize it in a certain way to bring it Or is it already there?
It's already been on Fox for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's going to break down in America on the different channels, but Fox broke up the fights between different Fox channels.
Yeah.
So FX1, you've got the prelims, and then you go into the main Fox channel the main Fox Sports channel for the main event.
Right.
That's a bit strange. You've got to change between the channels to keep up with the live event. I think I might be making this up. Anyone on Twitter, Dan won't see it, but I will. Anyone on Twitter might disagree with me, but I think ESPN are going to be keeping it to their streaming service.
Okay. So keeping it all
in the one place,
streamlined,
which probably will make a difference.
Yeah.
But I think ESPN were looking at it as a loss leader.
But then
what I hate about the UFC is it's notoriously hard to watch the fights after the fact in the UK legally. You know, if you don't have BT Sport, even legally, you have to wait till it's streamed again, shown again, whatever time it is. But you can't watch it even live as well. It's notoriously hard in the UK. But after the fact, when I've tried to watch things to try and take notes for whatever podcast I'm on that night, it's so hard. Like, why don't they just put it in with an app on say PS4, or I think they do that in America with the Xbox. They've got a UFC app.
And Fight Pass. So you'll get all of the fights on Fight Pass. But
that's a week later, I guess, is it?
It's a week or so.
Yeah.
It might be 2 or 3 weeks later you can get to see the main event on Fight Pass. And that blackout period absolutely kills it.
Yeah.
So your only recourse then is to record it on Sky Plus, TiVo, or whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now obviously if they're going to be moving more to an online.
But they must be aware that Sky's subscribership is declining rapidly. With the internet and streaming services that are available, it's not something that people go to first now.
But would you rather it went the way of boxing, where you've actually got to buy the pay-per-view to watch the pay-per-view? Because sure as fuck that's not going to work out well. Nobody's going to watch UFC if that's the case.
Do you think that the UFC's viewership in the UK would go down if they went to a strictly pay-per-view model?
Definitely.
I think so as well.
Yeah, because
once you've paid for it, can you watch it on demand then?
For a certain time scale on pay-per-view, I think within a certain number of hours you can watch it. Yeah.
But even then, how much would you pay? Never mind how much it costs for the actual ticket to go to the event, but how much would you two pay to watch Dan Till versus Wonderboy? That whole card, that main card. How much of your money that you earn would you put towards that?
It's a tough one.
Because it's not north of £30.
No,
I'll tell you that.
If you had to pony up for each individual card,
would it change from card to card? Definitely. No, is it a blanket number that they?
Cynically, probably not. We're probably looking at a flat fee like 45-50 quid per card.
No chance.
And I would have bought the McGregor Mayweather fight if I wasn't going somewhere where someone already paid for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people went to a casino to watch it.
Exactly. And there is this is the problem as well, that there's a shortage of places like that in the UK because you can't really go out. Like one of my big things is
sports bars aren't a big thing here.
Not really, and it's little drink licenses as well, especially in Scotland.
I think Scotland's catching on to it slightly more. They are providing places to watch these type of things, but it is generally in like a casino or something like that, and it's just.
But this is a
bunch of knob ends,
Yeah, wear earplugs.
That's my experience in casino.
But this is my problem with wanting to follow MMA when you live in. You said earlier, staying up late and being hungover for work or tired for work the next day. So this is, I think, a big factor of people complaining about fights. I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, I'm trying to think of an example. Like the equivalent of Ryan Bader versus Phil Davis. Like a better example actually. He's an even better example. Wonderboy Woodley.
Okay. Which one?
The second one's a better example of what I speak about. That was a difficult fight to watch.
Yep.
Not because I wanted to see two boys smashing each other.
Yeah.
It's mainly because I'd stayed up till 3:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I'd taken a nap during the day. I'd fucked myself for the next day, and I stayed up till 3 in the morning for that. Like, I know obviously there's already hurt his shoulder early in the fight. That's the way you fight Wonderboy. He owes us as fans nothing to fight.
And when you start to see how they fight, you know very quickly that you can guess the rest of the fight is going to go like that. There's no indicator that any one of them are going to take chances.
I'll be honest. I didn't stay up for that fight. And remember, in the UK, the main card starts at 3. The main event might start at 5, half 5. I skipped through that. I seen the first round and I thought this isn't going to be any different. I skipped to the last round. It was exactly the same.
The one I stayed up for and planned like a whole sort of party at my flat in Dundee at the time was the McGregor versus Aldo.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, right, this is going to be an amazing fight. 5 rounds, brilliant. And then I was like, wasted.
6 seconds.
You know, lots of whatever.
But that's fun though, because that keeps you up. That makes you like, I remember watching Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen live.
Yeah.
And that whole fight, you're just like, oh, fuck.
But that was a great fight because it was nerve-wracking. It was like someone who's never been shown to be really beatable for a few years against someone who's just put him in a weird mindset and could potentially put him in a dodgy place for 5 rounds. And it played out like that, but it was back and forth slightly. And then the last round was just like a cinematic movie, you know.
Beautiful fight.
That was probably Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen 1. The first one is probably the last fight I got like butterflies for, like excited, like oh my god, I can't wait. And it was because the story of Anderson before that, of him being sort of dismissed for his jiu-jitsu skill from Demian Maia, and he hid behind the referee and he refused to fight him and stuff. And I knew he was going to try and submit Chael, because Chael's like, Chael's game plan is I'll get you on the ground and I'll beat you up.
He's the master of like running in and blast doubling. You know,
totally.
You can't stop his blast double. You know, like when he was in his prime.
Yep.
It's what he has. He's just timed it so well that he just can put you on your back.
So knowing the stories going in, and like Anderson Silva forever has been my favorite fighter. I think.
I'm sorry.
I'm also sorry for my loss. I've lost a hero since he took dodgy Viagra.
We've all taken dodgy Viagra.
Pills.
But yeah, he's always been my hero.
I don't think it's what's in the Viagra that they're getting tested for. I think they're actually just taking Viagra before they fight, because it's supposedly good for your conditioning, because it opens up. It's a vasodilator.
Well, that's what it was for angina, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I'm of the mind that they're taking it on fight night, you know, and that's the whole thing, because it's good for your conditioning.
That does explain McGregor at the Mayweather weigh-ins. Wait a minute, guys, we're onto something.
I've never taken Viagra in that and put a jock strap on, but you know, maybe that's something he's into. I don't know.
Or maybe he's just like horny off his own success.
This conversation's moving into an area.
Okay, so obviously tonight, Sunday, May 27th, is Thompson versus Till. And this is a very anticipated fight amongst the MMA community. The whole card, on a whole, is not. I don't really think it's anything to sort of talk about. But obviously, this main event is huge, you know, and has a lot of repercussions for that division. Is there any fights that you're sort of excited about?
I'm having a real time. I'm trying to remember all the guy's name. Brad Scott versus something Junior.
It's a Brazilian guy.
No, it's Italian.
Pederzoli.
Exactly. I think he's Italian. He's had most of his fights in Italy. So
Pederzoli
Junior. Yeah. I think that's quite an interesting fight. Brad Scott came out, because obviously this is a late replacement fight. Brad Scott came out earlier in the month and was saying, I'm not too bothered about getting set with a new opponent, just put me in a different card. Okay. So it gets me thinking, like, where's Brad Scott's head at? If you look at the stare down yesterday, things were a little bit awkward. But I'm very interested in this fight because Brad Scott's coming off a loss. Yeah. This guy's coming off a couple of wins. I did my due diligence. I looked into this guy and I thought he had a loss against a guy called Shuyama or something. Yeah. I think the guy's name is in Japan. Yeah. And came back and he strung together 4 or 5 stoppage finishes. And I thought this guy's obviously learnt a lot from a big loss. Yeah. Picking up but the 2 fights most recently. 2 seconds, sorry. No worries. Well, they say that.
Oh, continue.
They say that before the fight. Start with they'll always say the card is subject to change, because obviously
a ticket protection thing.
Exactly. Cause the Khabib Tony Ferguson event, that was a roller coaster, man.
He tripped up and broke his leg or something.
And then.
So we were actually just saying there, the fight card has started. We're on the second fight of the card right now.
So Theodoro has won.
He won.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure how he won.
I definitely said he was going to win.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And Robertson and McCann is actually on just now, I guess.
Oh, is that the one that's on just now?
Yeah.
Well, so this goes back to what I interrupted you earlier.
2 seconds, I'll just refresh it just to see if someone's won or not. It must be still going. That's weird.
Gillian Robertson, she's fighting.
Yeah.
Who was on The Ultimate Fighter. So
pink hair don't care.
What we were talking about earlier was Scott and I's podcast, Jabbin with Kieran and Scott. Maybe Dad wants to call it good jabbing with Kieran and Scott. A good jabbing, but we'll find out.
A good jabbing.
A good jabbing.
Let's
figure that
that's
out.
good. It's slightly Scottish as well.
This sort of ties into what I was about to say about Molly McCann. One of the main motivations behind starting an MMA podcast, because there's obviously not enough MMA podcasts, was I want an excuse to explore
Not Scottish
more MMA.
ones. Yeah.
Because there's so much out there, and I'm missing so much, and I hate that I'm missing everything.
And a lot of it seems to be sort of, it's all reactionary stuff to the UFC. There's nothing that really goes in depth into anything. Like there's one person that sets up a podcast, doesn't really have to do anything, just gets people on to then make reactionary statements or predictions for a fight, but there's nothing that's of depth, and I guess you guys will probably end up doing that.
Yeah, so our whole motivation is to look at what made modern MMA what it is now. And we're seeing a lot more female fights, which is awesome. So we've got a few episodes planned on females. And Molly McCann,
MMA fight, female MMA.
Molly McCann, Meatball McCann. What I've just realised the other day, I've never seen any of her fights.
Right.
I watched the highlights package of her Cage Warrior stuff, and she's ridiculous.
Yeah.
She's an animal. She's so aggressive, and I can't believe I've never watched her fight before. She's been on Cage Warriors for years, and I can't believe I've not seen her. So as a reaction to things like that, that's why we wanted to set up this podcast.
You feel sort of almost like sexist in a way, because the world that we live in and talking about when it comes to MMA, it's predominantly male dominated, and obviously there's these amazing fights that happen within women's MMA, but it's not on the same scale as men's, as in the depth of people that are in those divisions, not the actual quality of fights, because the quality of fights has gone through the roof for women's MMA. But you do feel sort of like, I should know about these types of things when it comes up. It's like, I should know their background, I should know everything about, and it's just, you feel sort of, is this me being like ignorant towards it, or is it just the way it is, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I've said for a long time, I think women's MMA becoming popular is down to us as fans, male fans, but it's also down to women fans of MMA being supportive of it as well. Like I'm really happy with how mixed martial arts has dealt with female athletes, bringing them into the sport at the highest level straight away. It was like Ronda Rousey's the UFC bantamweight women's champion. A couple of people came out and said that, like, I think Fedor famously came out and said he didn't like to see women fight. But
but he's an Orthodox fucking Christian.
Exactly. But that was kind of roundly dismissed, though. Everyone was like, see where you're coming from.
He's just a mad old MMA fighter.
Exactly. We're actually pretty good with it.
A few of the older guys said...
Well, Dana White famously said, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
If he'd have said that this year, think of the uproar that would have happened. He just missed out on the sort of like social awareness of it by a few years. Like if he'd said that now, that would be an outrage.
Yeah, don't believe his lies. Because that's
I love the memes of him when he was in a hospital and it's like Conor McGregor threw the chair through the bus or whatever, the dolly, and it was like Dana White in hospital on the oxygen machine. It's just hilarious.
But yeah, I'm really happy with how the fan reception to WMMA.
Yeah.
There's I guess we can speak briefly about an episode we're planning.
Yep.
Okay.
An idea I kind of want to tease apart is how the development of WMMA has mimicked.
I like how you shortened
Thank
that.
you. I think that's fitting. I don't mean to separate the two because WMMA is just MMA, but it's for the shorthand. But how they kind of mimicked each other. I was thinking about this the other day, just expanding the idea beyond what we've spoken about. I mean, the Ultimate Fighter, the first Ultimate Fighter that had women on it was the second one, was the top ranked strawweights. Strawweights.
Right,
yeah.
And it was they had like the top 15 or top 16 ranked, and they matched them all together.
Yeah.
And it's kind of not dissimilar from the Ultimate Fighter with Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, and to a lesser extent the second season, which was the comeback season.
Yeah.
Then stylistically, if you look at it that way, Ronda Rousey, very similar to how Royce Gracie came through, the specialist, judo, jiu-jitsu, obviously very well connected, but came through literally arm-barring everyone.
Yeah.
Then she started to evolve, and then the sport kind of evolved past her, Holly Holm, Miesha Tate. Then you've
she was doing too many movies, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That was also a problem with MMA at one point as well, men's MMA as well.
Yeah,
exactly. So you start to see there's kind of it's just nice to see that there seems to be a kind of natural progression for the sport.
Yeah.
And I'm just really happy. And also another point to that point, it seems to be happening at an exponential rate. It seems to be happening a lot quicker. Where MMA developed over like a 15-year period, and it's kind of stayed where it is for the past 5. Women's MMA has kind of jumped ahead drastically. Now you've got the complete athlete, which is Amanda Nunes and Rose Namajunas. You've got like a can-do-everything fighter, an MMA fighter, as opposed to a specialist.
That last fight card, was it Amanda Nunes and that? Who was the girl?
Raquel Pennington, yeah.
I mean, I disagreed with her being in the cage with her. I don't think she should have been in that fight with Amanda Nunes. I mean, you know, she was just, you know, the one that was like verbally said, "I want to get out here."
Yeah.
What's her name? Raquel Pennington.
Right.
It felt like a lamb to the slaughter, but the depth of the division's not there, so you can't do that.
Yeah,
she's an adult, and if it had been a man that said, I want to get out here, and they had said, no, let's just, let's do this, it wouldn't have been an issue, but because it was a woman, there was a little more to it that people sort of were reading into. And if she had won off the back of that, it would have been an absolute amazing story, but obviously, alas, it didn't. And I didn't think she should have been in there by Amanda Nunes, but the roundness of that fight and the technique and the sort of back and forth sometimes, was just amazing. And I think we have to move past saying, women's MMA is like great, it should be just MMA as a whole now, I guess. It's got to that point where there's no division, I guess, now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, how many women's MMA fights do you see that are not entertaining now?
Exactly, and it's even if you do have your kind of quote unquote boring female fighters, there are.
But they happen in general.
Exactly.
So it used to be that if there was any women's fight on the card, it was 100% the most entertaining fight.
Yeah.
Because those girls had to go in there and prove that they deserved to be there. And now, I can't put words in women's mouth, but it doesn't seem like there's the same sense of urgency because there's multiple female divisions, there's multiple female fights on every card. The quality has gone down a little bit, which is, back to Scott's point, is where you see MMA in general. Earlier on, in MMA as a whole, you would always see exciting fights because the guys were essentially just prize fighters that were pulled up and had to prove that they deserved to be there. And then you got into the sport's popular, it's not going anywhere. I can grind out a win because I know that there's going to be a future here. A lot of the guys were fighting thinking that the sport wouldn't exist next week.
Exactly, that's a very good point.
And it's the same as women. They thought, I'm going to have to put on a good card here because if I don't, a good fight here because if I don't, women won't be on the next card. But going back to your point about Raquel Pennington, I was thinking about this the other day and I thought, if that was a man, would I feel different? Because I thought, like, if she's saying I'm done, and our coach is like, no, you're not, get back in there, as a pride sort of thing, you think, what is that for? If it was a man or a woman, I think I'd probably feel the same, in that you're going to go in there and take a whole load more punishment for no reason, other than your own ego. And I know that people will feel bad giving up.
But who
If you're just getting beaten up, then what's the point?
Who best knows you than your coaches?
Yeah.
And if they know that you have the capacity to do more and be great, then they could turn around to you and say, no, stop thinking that way. You know, you're going to stay in this fight. You're going to give your 100% for the next few rounds. If it was a guy, I don't think there would be the same conversation as much, you know, in regards.
Well, I think the last time we've seen that was Nate Marquardt, and he quit on the stool.
Yeah.
And was it Trevor Whitman? Trevor Whitman who says, right, you're done.
You're done. Chris Lieben as well.
Yeah.
Chris Lieben not to by Uriah Hall between rounds, came back after the advert break, and that was the end of Chris Lieben's career.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something I've thought as well. I mean, the fighter says to the referee, I want out, and then the fight's over.
That's the avenue. She chose to say it to her coaches. Exactly. Which is not the basis where you can sort of... I mean, maybe it was a pride thing. She didn't want to, like, say it to the ref, and then it sees, like, her giving up. If her coach is throwing the towel, that seems like they're making that decision, you know. But I don't think it's that. I think it was just they were like, nope, toughen up, you know, get in there. But I don't think she should have been in there. But I think those first couple of rounds were like just brutal to watch.
What's earned her that? Was it she earned that from her victory over Miesha Tate, right? Yeah, which was a dominant performance. But then Miesha Tate immediately retired.
Yeah.
So
she was obviously at the end of her career.
At least in Miesha's mind, she was at the end of her career. Yeah.
But I think the important thing about this is, though, even if she had quit on the stool, as fans, I don't think we would have thought any less of her.
No.
And I think that in and of itself informs future behaviour. It informs fighters, especially... It's a high-octane situation. It's the fourth round going into the fifth of a title match. Yeah. You know, I think the message that I'm getting from a lot of fan feedback on this is that we deal with it, even though it is a woman and it's been discussed that it is a woman in this position, and there are different considerations that we are making. I think the conclusion is very much the same, that nobody would have blamed you for not coming out for that. No. If she turned around at the referee and went, I'm out,
there's no stigma.
None of us would have been like, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Nobody would have thought that.
Nobody would have thought that. And that's what I'm very happy with MMA fans. Not often you get to say that as well. You know, and not to be fair, I think MMA fans get a bad rap.
They can be quite polarizing.
I think our point was that not only are MMA fans completely accepting of the females and saying you guys are fighting, it's like we were saying earlier, MMA is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
If you're going to go in there and fight, you're tough regardless of your gender. Not only that, but you've got that fight, Amanda Nunes, Raquel Pennington. That was Amanda Nunes is the first openly gay champion in the UFC. She was also fighting Raquel Pennington, who is openly gay and had her girlfriend in her corner and stuff. And nobody batted an eyelid.
No,
not at all.
And you know, in one sense, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's really cool, and that's probably where we should be. It shouldn't be a standout feature that, oh my God, we've got a lesbian on the card.
And not even that, like all those guys were friends because it's a small division. You know, it's a small pool that you're drawing from, and obviously you're going to band together in some situations. You're just going to become friends with people that are the same way. You're going to go through the same things, and eventually you're going to meet each other in the cage. And it was so weird to see that dynamic with them on the embedded. You know, because they all know each other. That's just the way it is. But it was cool. You know, there's a unity amongst the women's division that you don't really see in the men's division, I guess, you know.
But that's, going back to Scott's point, you did see that in the early days of the UFC.
You did.
Fighters might not have liked each other, but they banded together for the cause of MMA.
Yeah.
In the same way the women are banded together saying, no, we are female fighters and we should be on these cards.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
It's
really cool to see.
And I don't think it's too long until we'll have our first openly gay male fighter as well. I mean, there's a couple of... There's certainly certain fighters that are spoken about.
Do you not think Nick, the something ring, what's his name? He's definitely gay.
Yeah.
Was it the Promise Ring?
That was the Promise Ring, yeah.
I was in two minds of whether to bring this up as well, because I think it's very much just... It's looking at his mannerisms and his behaviour and assuming certain things about him. He has said some things in the past alluding to it, but he's never come out and said it. And I don't think it's a big leap. I think, if anything, that's probably the best way to go about it, because essentially it doesn't fucking matter.
No.
Doesn't matter that
it's not going to be the issue when you're fighting, you know.
Exactly. And there are other fighters that I won't name, but there are names out there that are mentioned that are secretly gay. It's just not discussed.
Are you talking about Georges St-Pierre?
No, he loves women. He said so.
Georges St-Pierre loves women.
He loves women.
Yeah, he loves women as much as he loves aliens.
Oh, really?
Indeed. No, but
wink.
Wink. But I don't think there's. I think obviously
he's probably asexual, to be honest. He probably doesn't have any sexual interest in anyone.
I think he's an alien.
He's interested in aliens.
That's why he was tweaking his nipples. He's
exactly. That's a Jackson's thing. That's Rashad Evans did it. Keith Jardine did it.
Do you know what? I've got a funny story about Rashad Evans. I met him as well at the same party that I was with. What's his name?
Jake
Shields. It was the same club night, and all the UFC fighters came to Toronto to watch. And I went to the bathroom at this club, and Rashad Evans taking a piss in the urinal. I was like, holy shit! Like, I wasn't fanboying, but I was like, oh, that's Rashad Evans. Not as tall as you think.
He's 5'9",
Like, he's a little bit taller than me, just a little bit. Two guys were walking out the cubicles. I don't know why they were in the cubicles together.
I think we all know why they were in the cubicles together.
Leading on from Nick, the Promised Ring. No,
I was leading on from cocaine. Makes everyone a better person.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug. The two guys turn round and see him taking a piss. I'm standing next to him on the left, and they have to look past me to see this guy, and they're like, "You fight in the UFC?" And he's like, "Yeah." It's like they couldn't like name him though, and he was like, "I'm Michael Johnson." That's what he said to them. Michael Johnson being another black fighter in the UFC sport, but at a completely different weight division, and he used like their ignorance and prejudice against him, and I turned around to him straight away and looked at him, and he was like this to me, and I was like, "Yep, it's Michael Johnson." I said that to him.
That's very fucking funny, man. That's very funny. Oh, man.
The only cool story I've got like that is when I went to UFC 138 in Birmingham. I got a media pass. It was one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. But I got a media pass, so I was standing at one of the press entrances waiting for them to check my ID and stuff. And Mike Brown from ATT came along.
Wow.
And he came along. He was like, I'm looking for this and this and this. And I didn't say hi. I don't want to interrupt people if they're in the middle of stuff. Yeah. But I gave him a wee nod. He said hi. And then he went into the bathroom. And the door closed. And there was a female sign outside. And then he came out immediately looking embarrassed. And I thought, as Mike Brown just walked into the ladies' toilets. But yeah, that's the only interesting story I've got about it.
So just to interject, so the card's happening live. So Theodoro, he won Robertson, McCann, round 2 sub.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott, it's live just now actually. It's going on, so I can't comment on
Molly McCann won. Did she lose?
Win for Robertson.
Win for Robertson?
Via sub in round 2.
Oh.
Yep.
That's a big... Well, Molly's from Liverpool. That's a big defeat for her.
Geez.
I know, especially in that sort of stage as well.
She's come up from Cage Warriors as the champion. She's missed weight, and then she's lost in her hometown.
So...
What a story.
Obviously, there's not really any fights that sort of grab the attention on the card as much as we'd hoped. I thought Gunnar Nelson and what's his name, when it was scheduled to fight, but Gunnar pulled out.
Yeah. Who was that?
I can't remember.
I can't remember now.
Anyway, he was scheduled to fight, but they swapped up because Gunnar's got a knee injury. So I think for the whole card, for me, it's kind of just a bit muted. So the main event is it? What are your thoughts on what's been happening?
Wonderboy Till. I think it's quite a shame that there's been restrictions put in place on Darren Till rehydrating. I think we all know that people are going to cut weight and cut water weight and dehydrate and then come back up.
Yeah.
And whatever you feel about that system, we all know that happens. Yeah. And to purposefully say, Darren, you can fight, but you're going to lose 20 or 30% of your purse. Also, you've got to fight dehydrated. Scott said to me earlier, it's probably his own fault. He maybe should fight a middleweight instead. Yeah, maybe. I'll let you make that point in a sec, but Also, that's
did you see
it's unfair not to allow someone to rehydrate.
Yeah.
Considering how much dehydration is going to affect your ability to.
Well, you want to protect your brain as well. You know, if you get hit while you're dehydrated, that can be end badly
that's
for you.
That's exactly where I was going. Yeah.
Do you believe him when he said that he had like a family emergency?
Apparently, yeah, he has somebody quite close to him in the hospital right now.
Okay. And that's what he said that interrupted his cutting process because he had to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Maybe his girlfriend or his baby or something like that.
Wow. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
He was granted an exemption or an extension from the UFC for making weight. He was granted a 1 hour extension due to a family emergency.
Wow.
That's fair enough. And I mean,
if it's true, then obviously we can't say anything or do anything. That's just what it is.
I just like I kind of agree. I think it's a fair thing to say for Stephen Thompson to say this is the condition. You have to be under 188 pounds when you weigh in at 1 p.m. today. I think gaining 18 pounds from where you should have been isn't too bad, and I think he weighed in 174.
74.
I think. Yeah. So I mean, that's 14 pounds. 14 pounds he has to make.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's reasonable. It's not as if they're asking him to come in at 180.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
But where he has fought in the past is the weight he's going to come in inevitably in this fight as well. So it doesn't really make a difference. I think he's going to be a heavier weight when he comes in, and he's fought everyone. He's weighed in and then fought everyone at the weight he's come into the cage, you know.
I think the difference is the amount of time that he's got to make it back up.
Right.
So he's got between 1 and, say, 8 p.m. to make it back up to his normal fighting weight, whereas beforehand he would have had the whole day to make it back up to that weight. So it's just the weight cutting issue's contentious, definitely.
It's something that has to be addressed somehow. I don't know how personally it can be done. There's talks of same day weigh-in. Obviously, that's detrimental for people. You know, I mean, they're going to cut weight and they're going to be dehydrated. And they're going to get like seriously injured.
Yep.
Definitely.
I think alleviated. It has been through having the day before weigh-in. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's obviously helped a little, but there's people are still doing massive weight cuts, and I don't know how we affect it.
Well, I think I like the one FC way of doing it. You weigh. I think they weigh in the day of the fight as well.
Okay.
To make sure they aren't above a certain amount of what they should be, which
it's
I think is
a ratio, isn't it?
Exactly, because it is really unfair. It's not an accurate measurement of how good a martial artist someone is, how much weight they can cut. I mean, back to the Darren Till, Stephen Thompson fight. I think this is Darren Till's first. I wouldn't say it's his first real test. I just think this will inform our opinion on him very well.
How he's going to do in the top. I mean, what is Stephen Thompson just now?
He's number 2.
Okay.
Till's ranked number 8. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's still a big gap, though.
It is.
It's huge.
And I'd have been saying all week, so since this fight's been announced, I think that Darren Till walking away from this fight, basically anything from a split decision loss and up is a win for Darren Till.
Yeah.
Especially considering what's been happening in his personal life leading up to this fight.
And it being in Liverpool, home turf, you know, there's a lot of pressure. Even though some people think of home advantage, it can also play on your mind a lot as well.
It's a lot of stress.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. So Scott said to me earlier that if Darren Till loses a split decision, it's probably still a win because he's hung in there with Wonderboy. But I think a lot of people are going to be making the comparisons between how Darren competes with Stephen Thompson compared to how Tyron Woodley competed with Stephen Thompson. Because I think stylistically aside, Darren Till is an explosive striker, tends to go for the one shots or the 1-2 combos. Tyron Woodley at the same time, his striking is powerful but rudimentary in that he goes for singles or 1-2s. And he
doesn't use distance either.
No.
Tyrone really, you know, he waits for you to come in,
and
then he hits you.
So people will be looking at how does Darren do versus how does Tyrone do against Wonderboy, and that's probably going to dictate where he sits in the division after the fight, regardless win or lose.
Yeah,
how he fights him, because like you say, that fight was both fights with Tyrone and Wonderboy were boring as hell.
Where do you think he ranks positionally if he beats Stephen? MMA math again.
I know rankings. I don't find very informative at all. No, because it is just an amalgamation of everyone's opinion. It is by committee.
Super subjective.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's. I think the title picture at welterweight's very congested anyway. So adding Darren Till to this equation, or having him leapfrog, everyone kind of confuses the situation. Tyron Woodley's coming off a shoulder injury, and he does fight quite often.
Yeah.
He just needs to get a couple of guys out of the way and fight them. He needs to fight Colby Covington. His name escapes me. Who's Colby Covington fighting for the interim belt again?
Is that Dos Anjos?
Dos Anjos, yeah. Sorry, that's the name I was forgetting. So those are two guys that Woodley kind of needs to fight first before he fights Darren Till.
Yeah.
I think Darren Till's getting pushed to the moon a little bit right now. And he's
even having it take place in Liverpool shows you how much the UFC are backing Till in this situation.
Do you think that Darren Till doesn't deserve a title shot if he beats Stephen Thompson, though?
If he beats him decisively, if it's like a shutout,
you think he jumps to the top?
No.
Yeah, really?
No, I don't think so.
If
they will do it, but I don't think he deserves it.
But I mean, this isn't going to happen.
He's got a couple of fights.
Yeah.
This isn't going to happen. But if Darren Till does walk through or go through Stephen Thompson, there's a big argument for him being able to fight for the title because he did something that Tyron Woodley wasn't able to do or didn't do.
That's what I was
but yeah, I just think he's a young guy. There's no rush to push him to the title. No. I mean, he's already said he's probably wanting to jump to middleweight and light heavyweight at some point.
Okay.
Let's give the boy a bit of time.
He's a big guy, and he cuts a lot of weight.
And especially him making a big deal about that and missing weight.
There seems to be
But it should be a non-issue. Like, you've done it before. It should be, like, if there's family issues there, then that's understandable. It's in the middle of your weight cut. If that is a ploy to sort of make excuses for it, then there should be no excuses for it. It's a hard one to judge at that point. But does his skill transfer into higher weight classes? That's the thing. Has he got an advantage because he is at that weight class?
I think Darren Till's main advantage is he does a lot of similar movements to Wonderboy. I hate calling him Wonderboy. He's like 35. No. He's not a boy.
He's got grey hair now as well. It's so weird.
Stephen Thompson. He does a lot of the same footwork as Stephen Thompson in terms of fading out, switching stance, and then coming back with the straight left.
Right.
Stephen Thompson and Wonderboy Till, Darren Till do the exact same things. In terms of movements, I think Wonderboy is maybe a bit better with his judging of the distance and using it.
He's more technique orientated.
That side of things is definitely going to work if Darren goes up to middleweight or even light heavyweight. He says he walks about 210.
Yeah. If
he goes up to middleweight, those sorts of things will stand him in good stead because that's what stood Anderson in good stead, right? Yeah. And to a lesser extent, that's what stands Michael Bisping in good stead. He's judging of distance and footwork. He won't have the power advantage, which is what Conor McGregor has at lighter weights and what Darren Till has just now. Yeah. He's got the one shot, my left hand can change your
Seems he's following the same sort of path as that, as Conor, he's got that advantage, the one shot power advantage because he is bigger, like you're saying. Mm-hmm. And then will that dissipate when he gets to a higher weight class?
Yeah, I think it will. In the same way as Conor. I think if Conor fights at welterweight, which is maybe where his body naturally is, if he fights at welterweight, it's yet to be seen, but I don't think he's going to have the same power advantage.
No.
Well, he didn't against Nate Diaz.
But Nate is notoriously difficult to knock out. I mean, I think it's only happened once in his career.
Thompson.
Yep. Caveman Skull that you were talking about.
Yeah, well, the Mexicans, he's half Mexican, but the notorious, boxers are notoriously hard to knock out. I think they just have like an extra lining in their skull or something, Well,
that's Josh Thompson caught him with a head kick clean. I think Diaz was walking away or not running away, moving away, and he caught him from behind and head kicked him. I think Nick threw in the towel as well, so that was a pretty brutal knockout. Yeah. So,
what are your predictions for this fight then? We'll just sort of bring it to that.
Predictions, I can see. Do you know what? I'm 50-50. My heart, I want Till to win. I really want him to win, but at the same time, I don't see Stephen Thompson losing.
Right. Okay.
I think he's just more experienced, especially against that type of fighter. So I'm going for a Stephen Thompson decision.
Okay.
Scott? Same. Stephen Thompson decision, but Darren Till gives a very good account of himself.
Okay.
In spite of the personal stuff he's going through just now, and being not an experienced fighter, but compared to an enigma, like a guy that anyone would find difficult to work out in Stephen Thompson.
So we're going to just find out he's like a young whippersnapper that's going to be given his comeuppance against an older, more experienced fighter.
He's biting at the heels.
I mean, Stephen Thompson is 10 years older than Darren Till. As well, so that comes with a certain level of, that's 10 years of martial arts experience, most probably behind him.
But we have to keep in mind Darren's eighth in the rankings, arbitrary as they are. Stephen Thompson is number 2. That's a big gap, and especially that division. You know, that it progressively gets more complicated as you go up that ladder.
I can see Darren Till taking the same path as Robert Whittaker.
Okay.
Because Robert Whittaker had the same. I think he's probably more well-rounded than Darren, but he had the same sort of hype around him at welterweight until he faced Stephen Thompson, and then he moved up to middleweight, and
then he's like a beast.
How good he is at that weight. I think it's the same thing with Darren Till. I think he moves up to middleweight soon.
But Darren Till also has a very good story behind him as well. The whole, he was having problems with people he was hanging about with in Liverpool.
Got stabbed
twice.
Moved to Brazil, and then he comes back. He speaks fluent Portuguese.
He can only speak Portuguese when he comes back, which is weird.
He's got Mackenzie Dernism.
He got hit in the head.
Yeah.
He went to like Brighton and got knocked out, and he came back and could only speak Portuguese.
Frontal lobe injuries.
What is it that happens to, you know, when you have that
foreign accents?
Could only speak French.
Mackenzie Dernism. But but Darren Till as a fighter, as a marketable fighter, I'm very interested in him. Win, lose or draw, his career goes on from here, and he's going to be a staple in the MMA community for the next couple of years. I mean, I've done this a couple of times this podcast, but knock wood, because every time we have a guy like this, we have a Conor McGregor, we have a John Jones, we have a Ronda Rousey, something ends up happening, and they end up, you know, doing something that pushes them out of the.
Well, like you're saying, on his side, he is only 25, which is that's crazy. Considering
you know what he's been through.
Potentially, my thought path is that MMA fighters, regardless of when they start, have a 10-year span. That just seems to be what we've seen from Pride. You know, the old guys getting to UFC and they're just not the same. To now, when you start training, it has effect on and a toll on your body. And 10 years seems to be the gap that most people have, you know, regardless if they start at like 20 or 15. And I don't know if that's going to have an effect on him. Is he going to have a long career, or is that just going to be, he's going to make his way and do a McGregor, like get out the sport and be... If
you go by the 10-year thing, he's coming up for his prime now. Because he started Thai boxing when he was 15 or 16.
He's 62 and 0 in Muay Thai.
Yeah.
What?
He's 62 and 0.
16 or 17 he started. I think he was fighting adult fights when he was 16. So he's coming up for his 10 years in fighting.
Maybe we'll see. My prediction is I think Till wins.
Someone's going home disappointed.
How's he going to do it?
By a triangle.
He's going to pulse out.
A Google platter.
Google platter. Go guard.
He's going to do it from a twister.
You just reminded me of something, a point I used to make quite a lot, speaking about Pride and like the shelf life of certain fighters. Like, obviously, when the UFC bought Pride, a lot of guys came over. Crow Cop famously had a pretty lackluster performance against Eddie, what's his name?
Cummins?
No.
Not Cummins, that's the BJJ guy, sorry.
BJJ guy, yeah. No, against Eddie, I can't remember the dude's name. Bleach blonde hair. I can't remember the guy's name. Anyway, the first fight in the UFC was pretty lackluster. And a lot of people were making the comparison between fighting in the cage, fighting in the octagon, and the differences there.
Eddie Sanchez,
thank you very much, Internet. But one thing I've always thought that people overlook is when people were fighting in Pride, you were genuinely fighting at the Satayama Super Arena or somewhere else in Japan. Most Pride events were in one of 3 locations. Yeah. And I think that's an overlooked thing when you look at MMA, like guys who fought in Pride, the guys who fought in the UFC. Fedor is a good example as well. If you look at Fedor's fight record, almost every fight in his run, from fighting Tosaka to fighting Werdum, almost every fight is in the Satayama Super Arena. How much do you think that factors in to fighters? You know, there must be a certain degree of familiarity We're gonna have one word for each, isn't it?
What's yours, Kieran?
Exactly.
I've had a few. I think I've had a few.
But yeah, I think that's a factor people overlook quite a lot. Because there's a lot more traveling as well. You just had a UFC in Chile. I mean, a lot was said Michael Bisping turning around and fighting not long. Kelvin Gastelum after fighting GSP. That fight was in Singapore. Was Singapore? Hong Kong?
But equally, Federer fought in the US as well, which is still the same. It's equidistant for him, you know, and he's still...
But that's when his career started to go downhill. When he fought Andrei Arlovsky in WAMA, and that was in the US.
Andrei Arlovsky wasn't WAMA, that was
Tim Sylvia.
Was it not Bulldog?
No, he never fought in Bodog, but he fought Andrei Arlovsky in Affliction.
That was it, I thought it was Bodog.
It was Tim Sylvia he fought in the WAMA.
Yeah, that's right.
WAMA was a good idea. It just never became a thing. That was the problem.
Where are we going with this?
The traveling, like how often fighting in different time zones. Like I was speaking earlier about fighting at, like Alistair Overeem was saying, you know, I'll fight at 11 o'clock in the morning if you want me to, you know, like when fighters fight, where they fight. It's a factor you kind of don't consider because we just sit down and watch it on TV.
And especially like Japan, that's a completely alien place for most people. Imagine someone who's from like the middle of Russia going into a place where it's all these bunch of like little Japanese people, you know. Exactly. It's like gotta be so surreal.
Hulk Hogan, in one of his autobiography or a biography of him, famously said that he lived a 400-day year because he travelled between the United States and Japan so much. So that's not how time works. Terry.
But to be fair, Hulk Hogan also struggled with separating his stage life with his personal life.
He has a pretty skewed worldview, you know, when he doesn't like black people that much.
Yeah, that was disappointing. That broke thousands of hearts.
He will bang his best mate's wife for money. So
well, they asked.
Would you not?
They asked him, and he said, "Yeah."
Exactly. Exactly.
Complex man.
So I think we're pretty much at the end of the podcast. You know, we've been going for quite a while. We didn't talk much in regards to what your guys' plans are for your podcast. Do you just want to give like a preface to it and what you hope for it and where people might eventually find you?
Yeah, okay. So Scott and I are starting a podcast which we're calling right now Jabbin with Kieran and Scott, which is a personal joke, but it's also in relation to Jabbin, which is a punch. Yeah. The main premise of the podcast is we're going to look at different topics where we look at what made modern MMA what it is today. So how much did wrestlers affect what we see in the cage right now? How much did the evolution of the women's game change? Are there specific people throughout the evolution of mixed martial arts as a whole that have affected what we see as martial arts today?
Why we have certain rules, like why headbutts are illegal, why
10 to 12 elbows,
10 to 12, 12 6 elbows, 12 6, 10 to 12 elbows, fine. But you know, and just to try to give examples of this is like why stomps aren't legal. Two fights I could cite straight off the bat would be Yuki Kondo, Wanderlei Silva. Try watching that fight. I've got a pretty high tolerance to violence, but that is difficult to watch. That is a man stamping on another man's face. Wes Sims, Frank Mir 2, I think, when Wes Sims just decides I can't beat this guy and just grabs the side of the cage and starts stomping him.
And a lot of Vale Tudo stuff as well.
Exactly. Another idea for an episode right there. How does bare knuckle affect MMA? Looking at because you look at Wanderlei's old IBC fights and then see he doesn't fight any differently. He's still swinging fists like he's moshing, you know. But it's you can tease these ideas apart. That there are reasons why we got into MMA, and it wasn't because Conor McGregor was a marketable star. It wasn't because John Jones was an interesting prospect. It wasn't because Ronda Rousey showed me that I could be a fighter too.
So basically you're doing like MMA anthropology, you know, you're
a little bit,
essentially. I've never thought of it like that. I'm thinking of MMA history and applying those lessons to today so that we can better understand how the sport is. But that's essentially anthropology. So we've got our tagline.
Exactly. Anthropology. But it just, for me, I think both of us have this sentiment that we kind of we feel as though recently there's been a bit of a drop off. It's been difficult to follow the sport. It's difficult to be passionate about the sport. Every time you build up a bit of momentum, it gets dashed because John Jones gets caught for something. Conor McGregor throws something happens.
People
that
go
derails.
boxing as opposed to MMA. Yeah,
Exactly. And it's just there's so much happens in MMA, and so much has happened in MMA. It's worthwhile speaking about it critically, about times that have gone past that aren't in the discussion just now, and pick it apart. And just we've been speaking for 3 hours about a lot of different subjects, but me and Kieran sat I think it was over Christmas one year. We sat and spoke for MMA for about 10 hours. So it can be done, you know.
It was New Year, yeah.
It was New
I
Year,
feel like we could go on for a lot longer though as well.
We could indeed.
So essentially, if you feel a little bit romantic about MMA as it was 15 years ago, and you used to stay up until 6 a.m. watching Japanese MMA, or if anyone from America is listening, if you used to stay up super late watching UK MMA, trying to watch cage rage and things, we're going to be talking about that sort of stuff. Yeah. At the moment, we don't have any social media presence. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be recording a few episodes, and we'll announce when we're launching over the next month or so. I think.
And obviously, I'll promote it. You know,
thanks very much,
I'll let all you guys know where it's going to be.
And again, thanks for having us on, man.
Honestly, man, it's been amazing.
Yeah.
It's been really good. And where can people find you on your respective social media platforms?
So the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. Dan won't, but the rest of people can. I'm the Kieran, TheKieran on Twitter. That's my handle, the Kieran. I'm most active there. My Facebook, everything else is shut down. You'll get me on Twitter.
Okay.
And just Facebook for me, Facebook and Instagram, I guess. My handle generally is Metal Gear Smithy. You can usually find me there.
I always loved that name.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You can probably catch me there, but I will be setting up a separate kind of social media for this kind of stuff, just to make it a bit more professional, because we do want to have guests on at some point and bring people into the conversation to discuss stuff.
And a place where people can interact with you, you know, individually, but not privately as well, you know.
Definitely.
Exactly. We're really keen to hear people's relationships with MMA as far back as it goes. Me and Scott love talking about old fights that we watched, maybe together or differently, or Scott's watched a lot of different fights than I have. It's great to talk to different people about their different experiences with MMA. So,
and people's different interpretation of fights and what impact they have as well, I guess, is a big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This is an endless fountain of sort of source of conversation.
Yep.
Okay, anyway, it's a good point to end on.
Thank you very much, man. Much appreciated. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.